Yippee-yay!
From Studio 401, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on The Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt, and here's our headlines. Millions of pesky love bugs invade Florida. Twice a year, pesky invasive love bugs swarm Florida, splattering their gooey insides on car hoods, windshields, and even flying into people's mouths. And of course, annoying visitors at the happiest place on earth. In recent days, Florida social media users have been sharing video and photos of the annoying insects as the bugs descend on the state in which many people are calling the worst love bug infestation in years. Love bugs are an invasive species, also known as the honeymoon fly or double-headed bug. During and after mating, adults pair remain coupled, even in flight, for up to several days. And contrary to rumors, they were not genetically modified and then released by scientists as a way to rid Florida of mosquitoes. They don't even eat mosquitoes. Source, Geek.com. And a Bigfoot has been spotted in Pennsylvania. Culver, Pennsylvania. A man in Cambria County says he saw a creature he believes to be a Bigfoot. The 59-year-old retired man who provided his full name but opted to remain anonymous told Cryptozoology News last week that he was with his truck parking near the woods back in 2014 when the animal showed up. He's quoted as saying, "I was going hunting. I parked the truck and saw this thing come out of the woods," he said. The Culver resident claims the bipedal creature then walked down the road as it turned its head back to look at him. Quote, "It looked at me. It scared me so bad I was shaking." The man describes the animal as a black, 8-foot-tall primate. He estimates the weight at around 500 pounds. The sighting, he said, lasted a few minutes. The eyewitness did not present photographic evidence of the alleged encounter. Culver is an unincorporated community with a population of 1,000. Just a month ago, 2 women claimed to have seen a Bigfoot creature in Cambridge Springs, Pennsylvania. Source, Cryptozoology News. And the world's most depressing sports competition has coffins for prizes. The Julica Coffin Cup is not your usual futsal tournament. It's a competition between teams representing the 12 largest funeral houses in the Puno region of southeastern Peru. So it kind of makes sense that the main prize be something representative of the funeral businesses. Still, fighting for your heart out on the pitch for an expensive casket you have to share with 5 other teammates doesn't exactly sound worthwhile. But that didn't stop the winning team from parading their $1,300 luxury coffin on their shoulders and singing "Ole, Ole, Champion" at the end of the final match. Source, OddityCentral.com. And now for an informative and important fun fact. A pregnant goldfish is known as a twit. Thanks for listening to the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS T-drift.
Contact, nice, clear in orbit. The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Broadcasting from atop a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void on this Monday night, the 13th, on into the 14th. Tonight, we have a few really cool announcements we're going to make, and then we'll be speaking with astrologer, spiritual advisor, esotericist, Jeff Harman. So we're going to be discussing why it's not woo-woo to do things like clearing space and warding your house, stuff like that. That stuff's important. And give you some examples, possibly, of some infestations and some things that happen. Maybe even what you can do, and possibly even go down the road of spiritual possession. You know how I like to get into that stuff. The call-in number is the good... Oh, yeah. By the way, we do got our good number back, which is 1-800-588-0335. That's the good one with the Q, and it's also toll-free from the United States or Canada. So put that, save it in your phone, 1-800-588-0335. Text-in line is the same as the station number, 501-777-5631. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter, but those are your numbers, right? I don't have to tell you guys about that at all. Hopefully you got that saved in your phone. It's not hard to save stuff in your phone. I can't tell you how many times we've done the show and people say, hey, what's that number again? Hey, what's the number again? What's the number again? You look in the chat. What's the number again? Just save it one time, and you'll always have it, because that's the number we plan on keeping for a while. Thanks to you guys. Thank you, all of you new supporters, so much. I really, really appreciate it. We really appreciate it, and I want to give a special, huge, big shout-out to the new, so to speak, team here. So to Pancho Patrick. He's a co-producer. Dawn. I had a lovely conversation with Dawn. You guys have never heard Dawn's voice, but guess what? I have, and she has come on to the team, and she is very smart, very intelligent, and we're happy to have her. Also, Barbara and Blake, and then, of course, we always got Dennis and Eric, and then we got you guys, too. You guys are the best. Some of you have been here for a very long time. So anyways, I wanted to say that I really, really appreciate that, you guys. As far as the network goes, we've got new show hosts coming. We got one about to launch on Saturday nights. We got 3 or 4 new shows coming, actually, so look forward to that. Really good host, top-notch stuff, actually. Really, really good stuff. So here's the deal. If you want to support the show, you can always donate. That is one of the best ways to do it. We've gotten a whole bunch of new likes on the social media pages, so we've broke some boundaries there, too. God, I hate bragging from the start of a show. How boring is that? But I'm proud of you guys, right? So thank you. Thank you so much. And don't forget the webinar, Forget the Tea, is moved to Monday the 20th. I mean, what have you got to lose? You guys got everybody trying to shove health products down your throat. You do, right? I know you do. But you want to be able to pick the right one. And I'm telling you from firsthand experience, I was probably the most toxin-infested guy on the planet until I got some tea. And then I got some other stuff like Allison, and then a little bit of CBD oil. Also got some 8th Element. And then I got the GI Joy, and I'm feeling much better. I even talked to John today on the phone. He said, man, you're starting to sound like you feel a lot better. And I really, really do. Ronnie's stuff is the best stuff out there to get, especially when it comes to CBD oil. Everybody's got a freaking CBD oil company now, don't they? I mean, you hear it all the time, but you want to know, okay, which one's the real deal? I'm telling you, everything about Ancient Life oil is the real deal. I've got the chocolate mint, 250 milligrams CBD oil. I take it once a day, and it does the trick. And I really can't talk about what it does, but it does the trick. And let me tell you about some of the little stuff. I just want to get this out of the way real quick. In these, for example, like the GI Joy, this is for digestive health. This is probably the one thing I need the most right? Because the acidophilus, the aloe, the peppermint, the turmeric, and the colostrum, that's it. I'm a little dyslexic. But this one is the one I need the most. So I'm looking at this, and I started thinking, man, what are these little capsules made of? Is it plastic? Is it dissolvable plastic? Not even these things, man. They're vegetarian, dissolvable plastic, no GMOs. Everything about this stuff is top notch. So you don't even have to guess. Just take my word for it. Everybody's trying to slam health products and oil and stuff down your throat, and you know where to go. Ronnie's got you hooked up. And also, don't forget to prepare with the Fringe at preparewiththefringe.com. More on that later. We're going to talk a little bit more on that. Our website is lightingthevoid.com. Thefringe.fm is the network. Also, if you want to report a UFO, do it at UFO Seekers. Call 661-UFO-7889. Their website is ufoseekers.com. Backed and supported by the Fringe FM and Lighting the Void. Check out their extraordinary YouTube channel full of compelling content where they take you on journeys with them on UFO hunts. YouTube.com/UFO Seekers. So tonight's focus is not so much, I know a lot of you want to talk about psychic attacks and all of that stuff, but there's more to that than just psychic attacks. Spiritual defense is something that is considered woo-woo to some people, right? But it's really not. And I think it's considered woo-woo because when you practice it, if you ever do this kind of stuff for the first time or you read about it, you start thinking, how silly am I going to look walking around a room, waving sage around or whatever method you're doing. It makes you feel weird because you don't think anything's happening. But the unseen realms don't work in the way this realm does. Our brain just registers that it can't make sense because there's nothing there. And trust me, I know, because I feel that way. I feel ridiculous when I do stuff like this. However, what I will tell you is when I started learning about these things, and I went to people like Jeff Harman for advice. Jeff has been here since the dawn of Lighting the Void. And I went to him for stuff like this, and he would tell me stories about it. And so I decided to go down this road and do these things. Spiritual cleansing, psychic self-defense. Maybe I do have this stuff in the metaphysical realms that's really hurting me, that's really doing something to me that I don't see. When you start doing this stuff, you can say it's psychological or psychosomatic or whatever you want to call it. The fact is when I don't do it, things get a little crazy. So I do a certain ritual for myself. What you guys know is the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. I do lots of prayer. I ward and cleanse the shack and my property. I do these types of things all the time. And this is the topic tonight. We're going to talk about a little bit about this. Also talk about how it relates with astrology. And speaking of which, Jeff is with us, and Jeff Harman is a second-generation astrologer. He's available for all of your personal and business needs. He's got over 40 years of experience in this. He's a master of classical, Vedic, and Kabbalistic astrology. He also draws from many other traditions of spiritual knowledge for clearing people and property of unwanted energies, is what we'll be talking about tonight a lot. And he specializes in electional astrology and the art of selecting auspicious times to sign contracts, release products, travel, schedule weddings, surgery, and other stuff in your life that matters. He owns a production company, and he's familiar with all aspects of the entertainment industry. And he's based out of California, and he's available worldwide by phone and internet conferencing. You can go to Jeff Harman, Harman, jeffharman.com. Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on the program. It's good to have you back, brother.
Hey, Joe, it's good to be back.
Well, do you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that when you start doing this stuff, you read about it and you think, oh man, that's cool. I want to learn how to do spiritual cleansing. And when you do it though, it does feel weird. Like from the outside looking in, you think you look like an idiot. At least I did, right? That's how I felt. Like I look like a moron doing this stuff. Is it really doing anything? Did you ever feel that way when you started learning and doing this stuff?
I don't know if I ever felt that way, but I always felt that, I was really lucky growing up with my mother because she was really a cool lady in that whole field. I always knew in my soul that this stuff was real. I mean, you take so many different religions had this integrated into it from the very beginning. the Catholic Church and, of course, Rome integrated a lot of the old Kabbalistic stuff that had been around much before that. I was just looking. It's funny, we did this topic tonight because you and I were talking before the show. And one of the things I was working on, I've got another person who was doing some research, and they wanted to know, hey, is there any evidence that some of the older medieval astrologers and farther back actually did anything with spirit possession using astrology? Well, one of the later ones was William Lilly, and he wrote a book called, actually, believe it or not, Christian Astrology. And that book, I think I'm looking at it right now, it came out in 1647. I've actually got a copy of it right here. And he literally has several areas and chapters dedicated to if one is possessed, if one has either spirits or disincarnate souls. And then they even go deeper into, is it a disincarnate, is it an entity, or is it some kind of an evil spirit, which is less common but does happen. You take these school shootings, and there was a psychiatrist in Tucson who I actually have several clients in the psychiatric business, and it's interesting. One of them's in a federal prison. We have conversations about how they believe they're possessed. They say things like someone else is talking. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. What was the guy that said that there was a guy that said his Uber app was talking to him. And yeah, I wonder about that stuff. I'm trying to differentiate, like, what's the difference between a psychological issue? Like if somebody has schizophrenia or something like that, or is it really a spirit, or are we calling schizophrenia because that's all we know to call it, and it's actually some type of weird possession? You know what I mean? We call it that, like it's a polar thing, and I'm wondering if it's actually mixed sometimes.
Oh, it is. I mean, one of the most compelling books and I love to mention this book, is Dr. Carl Wickland. Dr. Carl Wickland he was actually at the birth of Hollywood. He became a psychiatrist. Of course, you got to be a medical doctor first. And then he finished his school of psychiatry in Chicago, I think in 1916. And I love to tell the story because he came to Los Angeles with very high honors and literally was instantly or very shortly after he came here. I think it was about somewhere between 1916 and 18. And he became the head of the Los Angeles County Mental Institution. So he did not believe in anything spiritual. He didn't believe in possession, any of that. This is all psychosomatically able to be explained. Well, here's what happened. As fate would have it, he went to a party somewhere in Hollywood, met this beautiful woman, became smitten with her, married her, and found out later, guess what she was? A channel. So It's like, oh my God, here's Mr. Linear meets Mrs. Woo-Woo, right? But he was totally smitten with her. So he knew she was very logical and very intelligent. So he said, I'm going to examine you in a scientific analysis to see if these so-called entities that you channel are real or not. Well, you can read the book. It's called 30 Years Among the Dead. It's been out of print for years, and it's finally come back out again. It was just re-released, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years. I got the original copy, which was a long time ago. I was very lucky to get it. And the story is, I'm paraphrasing, but I'll kind of get to it quick here so I don't go too long with it.
Sure.
And that is, he, in his analysis, his wife takes on a spiritual entity, and that person looks at the doctor and says, you're the one who's been shocking me with that lightning. And I forgot to mention, Dr. Carl Wickland, if you research him, they used to call it a Windham generator. That is shock therapy treatment, which is still used to this day. Oh, man. And it's pretty hideous stuff. Even Vivian Lee had that done to her. Many people today still do. And they get a result. The schizophrenia is often reduced. Sometimes it goes away for a short time. Well, here's why. And this book really, and this is a book written again I think in the 20s is when it was originally compiled, but then the book was released later. I actually got a copy right here. I can look it up. But long story short, this is what's so great. the entity in his wife's body says, "You're the one shocking me with this lightning." And the person proceeded to explain a shock therapy treatment that had gone awry, I think within the last week or two. And the doctor says, "There is absolutely no way you could have known all these details unless you were there." And he says, "Well, of course I was there. You did it to me." He says, "It sounds like you're a man." He says, "Well, of course I'm a man." He says, "Well, look down." He says, "Do you wear a wedding ring and a dress?" The man says, "Of course not." And he looks down and he realizes he's controlling his wife's body, who the doctor is examining. And he says, "Oh my God." He said, "This is strange." And he then talks about how, what his profession was. I think in this case, he was I think he was a pharmacist. And he says, "No one can understand me anymore. They can't, listen to me, and I'm very frustrated." So he got him to realize that he must be disincarnate, meaning passed away, a dead person, right? So what's fascinating is then the guy sees one of his relatives. I think it was the mother or something he hadn't seen in like 40 years. And, she's passed away. And he says, "Oh, my God, this is so strange." So consciousness has such an effect on deceased people, and many of them get trapped in dimensions. And if anybody ever wants to research, this is nothing new. In fact, prior to the church and going way back into rabbinical literature, they actually called this a Rosh Ra'ah, which in Hebrew means an errant soul that is forced to wander the earthly plane. And it often happens to people who do really maybe unconscious stuff or violent stuff. It's a very complex matter. But anyways, back to Dr. Wicklund. So here's the clincher. He still says, okay, this is all possibility, except when he got the guy to realize his condition and he went off, quote unquote, into the light, guess what? The patient clears up at the mental institution. And I believe she was released within 2 or 3 weeks, something like that, with observation. So this began the title of this book, which is called 30 Years Among the Dead. For the next 30 years, he and his wife were bringing entities, releasing them, and helping disincarnate souls on the other side.
Wow. Can you imagine talking to that one? How do you not get freaked out?
Anybody can get this book. It's my favorite book in terms of psychiatric evidence. And what's fascinating is Wicklund was getting a real strong support from the AMA at that time, American Medical Association. And, of course, when his friend died, I think in the 40s, that's when all that dried up. The pharmaceutical companies, they want drugs, they want surgery, lobotomies, and whatever else they can get. Of course, they're not doing lobotomies.
So he's not credible anymore? Is that what you're saying? They don't treat him with the same credibility now that he's...
Well, gone. I think this guy died.
Oh, okay.
I forget when Wicklund died, but this book was the one I've got was printed in 1980. So I don't know if that's the original. It's probably not. But this is all work done back in the 20s. Absolutely fascinating stuff. And then the other evidence is other newer books like Dr. Edith Fiore. She wrote the book The Unquiet Dead. And, of course, Dr. Fry, who is another favorite of mine, she just passed away. She lived up in Colorado. And she was an MD who got sick and tired of, just medicating everyone and sought to figure out what is causing the schizophrenia, possession, and strange behaviors. Started becoming a hypnotherapist. And these are clinically documented cases where entities or disincarnates were contacted, released, and the patient cleared up over and over again.
Man. And you have a really knack for finding good stuff. You really do. Every time I talk to you, you got a new book that I want to get, and I'm getting that book.
Books years ago. Fascinating stuff. God, some of this stuff is 30 years old, 40 years old. They're 30 for sure. The stuff that gets me the most is the old rabbinical texts, particularly that they had this to a science, and this is way before the church came around. They had names for them. They would literally categorize disincarnate souls. They would have another one called a mazik, which is a damager. Then they would have a shahid, which is part human, part angel, part devil, where they had mixed in the soul or the spirit soul complex. Very deep stuff. And they would have all these classifications of terminology. And then, of course, if you get into the evil spirit world, the rabbinical texts specifically talk about Lucifer, Satan, Belial, and Leviathan. And then when you go beneath them, oh my God, there's legions. There's 8 sub-princes beneath that with this complete host of evil spirits that would be servants underneath that. And a lot of people think this stuff is hocus pocus. Well, the Catholic Church, as well as many other entities, and I can tell you, rabbis, they take it real seriously. And few people really get truly possessed like that unless they're playing with black magic and doing rituals and goetic stuff, lesser and greater keys of Solomon. That's where people run into trouble.
Abramelin the Mage, they get into that too, trying to do that stuff. I mean, Abramelin was a good text to me, but I think
Abramelin is astounding text.
Yeah. And I think that's the first book that I picked up that, I don't know if it was that one. I think it was, that showed me the 4 kings of hell or whatever. They just had the names of all of them in there. It could be a different text though, because I've looked at so many of them. But
the magic of Abramelin the Mage is really the technique that our fine religions omitted. That goes right back to Egypt and prior, and that's Chaldean, very, very ancient stuff. I think that goes all the way back to quite possibly the fall of humanity into this dimension. And what's fascinating is if you read the Sacred Magic, there's actually 2 versions out right now. There's the Mathers translation. Of course, he was in the Secret Order of the Golden Dawn and got in a lawsuit with Crowley and all that. And then there's the second one is done by Goethe, which is way, way better. And that was translated fairly recently. In fact, I got that right here. Very scholarly job. They actually translated it out of the Hebrew and the German, where Mathers did a great job in translation, but it wasn't an authentic copy. And where I'm going with this is if anybody studies that, which it sounds like you have, you'll find nobody gets command or the keys to the kingdom without an upper angel. He refers to it as your guardian angel allowing it. And he says out of thousands of people, you might get 1 to 5 who would ever be pure enough in soul to get that kind of power.
Now, isn't that what Crowley was trying to do? That's what I've read, that's what he was trying to do in Boleskine. When everybody was talking about, he was doing black magic out there. But from what I've read is he was trying to attempt the Abramelin the Mage ritual out there, and he stopped midway or didn't finish it. And that really is not a good thing.
Matter of completion. If the divine upper angels don't see your soul that pure, you're never going to achieve it. Yeah, it's not like getting a degree. You pay and you get. This is called purity of soul, and I don't think Crowley would have ever passed that test.
So this is some of the stuff that you do, though, right? Some people call on you and say that they need help clearing spaces and stuff. You do that for people as well?
Yeah, that's a whole nother world. And I started to mention earlier, like many of your medieval astrologers all the way back to Egypt, and some of the old rabbis were absolutely elegant at how they integrated astrology. They would literally cast a chart. It's called interrogation astrology, and modern astrologers refer to it as horary, which is the Latinized term. But that actually can tell you whether or not a dwelling or person is possessed with a high degree of accuracy, I might add. And what's fascinating is Lilly, which is a much later astrologer, again, he was in the 1600s, has several instances where he says, is this dwelling possessed or is this person possessed? And if so, to what degree and by what? And it's all done through the houses and the astrological aspects to the querent. And then if one is determined to be possessed in whatever capacity, because you've got a lot of different ways. It could be disincarnates, it could be entities, it could be legions, it could be evil spirits or some blend thereof. Then they would use electional astrology, and that's what I do. I use both the interrogation and the electional to pick an auspicious time at which to clear. I always like to use the old method that there was an Egyptian astrologer, Dorotheus, who always said you want the moon and the Lord of the Fourth, if it's a dwelling, to be separating from malefics and applying to benefic planets. And the same thing if you're doing a person, you want the Eastern Horizon ruler to be in very auspicious aspects as well as the moon. You have to have the moon in good aspect.
So let me clarify this then, and then we'll go into the break here. So you're telling me that if someone claims that there's a possession or something's going on, you can actually go out there, go to the place, and cast a chart and look at certain things to see if something's going on, if it's really there?
I've done it all the time, yeah. And I do a lot of remote stuff where I've never go there. Like I've had places on the other side of the world, New York, Montana, you name it, here, wherever, Europe, where individuals will say, hey, I've got a particular situation. And, I had a yogi once in India who had his grandson here and said that, he'd really gotten into some trouble with drugs and such. And he said, can you look into it and see if there's something wrong? And I said, yeah, it definitely looks like there's something wrong. I mean, he was not only acting strange, but he'd gotten in some real trouble. And what happened is he says, can you clear him? And I said, it says I can, because I said, but it looks like it's going to be pretty tough. And I had to wait to find a really good time. I got 102 fever after I cleared him. And that's why I'm really careful with this stuff, is because depending on the severity, the person doing it can really get into some problems. And I'm pretty sensitive to that stuff. So
even from a remote location, does that happen where it can affect you?
There's no distance. I mean, we're wired to say, okay, we got to get on a plane to go somewhere in order to be there. But if you're doing remote clearing, you can be there. Consciousness is instantaneous. You get into some of this with Claude Swanson and I were talking about this, the physicist. You should have him on sometime. Claude is a great guy. I really love him. He and I are pretty good friends. And he talked about the toroidal effect that they're discovering in matter that actually exceeds the speed of light. And that's where consciousness is. So you start getting into different dimensions. The scientists are finding ways to explain how consciousness actually is not localized in time. It's instantaneous.
Wow.
And this gets into the dimensional stuff and all kinds of pretty bizarre stuff. And thank God, most of us are protected from those barriers, because reality would really come apart.
That's fascinating. Fascinating stuff there. I know there's a reality to this, and I know that there's are people out there that claim that they can do these things that aren't real, but that kind of hurts the people that are really doing this stuff, because I believe this stuff's really going on. We're going to get into that too. More on this, elementals, clearing spaces. We're here with astrologer and esotericist and spiritualist Jeff Harman. We'll be right back after this.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
This is Crow 777, and you are listening to The Fringe FM.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves strip bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop, Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to The Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on The Fringe FM.
Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Bouval, Lon Maladuquette, Aaron Cheek, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts.
The Fringe FM loves hearing from you. Have a suggestion, comment, or question? We're all ears. Email talkback@thefringe.fm.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
All right, we're back. We're here with Jeff Harman. Listen, here's what I'm going to do. All right. For everybody that goes to preparewiththefringe.com, preparewiththefringe.com, and you want to do this instead of donating, you want to get a 4-week food supply of your servings of food to help you prepare for any kind of disasters. You'll get 252 servings. It's an average of 2,000 calories a day. These is good food, man. It's really good. You get breakfast, lunches, and dinners, drinks, and snacks, 16 food varieties, and this stuff has up to a 25-year shelf life, so it's perfect to have and prepare. So if you order anything, I'm going to do this for the first, let's say 15 people. If you order anything over $99, and keep in mind that if you do that, you also get free shipping. But if you order anything over $99, you can get a month food supply for $147. But if you order anything over $100, I'm going to send you a free T-shirt, a free Lighting the Void T-shirt, and we'll run that special for a couple of months. But I'll tell you another thing I like is because they got air purifiers, water filters, and they also got those really cool wind-up radios that I was telling you about. It's the perfect place to go for all your prepper needs. You guys go check it out. Preparewiththefringe.com or give them a call at 1-888-440-7931. So Jeff Harman's here with us tonight, and we were talking about the, clearing spaces, what real possessions are, how you attempt to, we were getting into that, how you attempt to figure out if something's really going on with astrology or not. But another thing that I'm curious about is, how do you tell if it's a demon or an elemental? Because earlier you had mentioned that, demon possession is rare. Is most of this stuff all in our mind, or is it elementals? That's the thing. How do you decipher what it really is? Or does the astrology tell you all of that?
Well, it's a great indicator. It's a great tool. And what I like about it is you can see various different severities with it, because you have so many tools using ancient astrology, not the modern stuff. When you start using the real zodiac, which is both Jyotisha, which is Vedic astrology, Nadi astrology, and also what I would classify as classical traditional astrology, which was pre-1600s or pre-1700s, you get a much richer read. So yes, you can see the severity. I mean, we've used it in treasure hunting. I've had people hire me to say, okay, great, we're going to do this treasure hunting, and they're out there with, multi-$1,000 ranger tells and all these different devices. And it's a quick story I'll tell. I had a guy fly me out, and I won't mention where. So they were absolutely sure they had gold. I said, okay, great, whatever. Let's check it out. So he brings me to the site. They have multiple sites. They got backhoes and big dump trucks and guys out there with chainsaws. They're running through. He owned part of the property, that's why. And he says, we know it's right here. Ranger Tell's got a reading. I said, you're going to find something, but I don't think it's what you're looking for. And he says, well, what do you get it is in the astrology? I said, well, I think you're going to find a bunch of old junk and iron. Oh, no. We know there's gold there. So they start digging away with the backhoe, and sure enough, about 20 minutes later, we see all these old pots and pans and junks. It was a garbage dump. And that's what they found, was a bunch of old iron. And how would I know that? Well, because in the ancient astrology, Mars rules iron, and the Lord of the Fourth had Mars, bullseye on the IC. So that's what they found, was old junk and iron. And it's interesting. So that's the kind of specificity you can get using the astrology. You may not get the name of an entity, though you can sometimes. You can actually get letters from certain zodiacal degrees, and that's an art that's lost. I don't claim to have it fully back, but I've been trying to reconstruct it. And interesting stuff.
So, some people, they go out there and they're like, yeah, man, I can feel some heavy energy here. I really feel the energy. What I'm trying to, here's my main goal here, Jeff, with this, and you know it, but I'm just going to say it again, is when it comes to things like psychics and the world of the metaphysical world and spirituality and stuff, I know it's real. There's skeptics out there that don't know if it's real or if it's not. I believe in it. I know it's real. But what concerns me is a lot of the fakery going on. And I'll say this, and you don't really have to comment if you don't want to, but I'll say this because I know that guys like you who do this stuff for real and it's really happening and you're really helping people, that it kind of hurts, right? Because, I mean, you can pay, so I've done this. I've made this mistake before in my life. I paid somebody to help me with spiritual stuff because I was desperate, and they come out there and, yeah, there's a lot of bad energy here, and they do their sage and stuff, and nothing really happens, So
I had one client get charged $40,000 to sage the house. I said, I would find that a little suspect.
$40,000. My God.
Oh yeah. Or I've heard people just doing really outrageous things to people for a fortune. And, that's a little outlandish. I'm not like that. And I don't, I mean, I wish I could do it for free. It's just, you got to live. You got to make a living. But
that's what you do, yeah. Yeah, that's all I'm trying to bring up is it's that way it's that way in everything. Ufology, the paranormal. The reason why regular media can't take us seriously is because we've got so many frauds out there, and it hurts the whole community. And it hurts me. It hurts my heart, actually, because I know that the spiritual realm is real. And a lot of the questions that a lot of people ask me on the show, Jeff, is about magic. And they know I study the magic. They know I'm somewhat of an occultist. But I learned a long time ago, after getting slapped around by it, to take it slow. And not everybody agrees with me on this, but I think you do. I think people, if they're going to get into this
I think
stuff,
it's outright dangerous.
They need to take it slow.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. I always tell people, stay away from grimoires and magic, particularly things like the Goetia, the Chaldean, the Enochian. There's many different branches. And I'm not here to tell anybody what to do, but my observations are the minute you start playing in those realms, summoning spirits or trying to do anything, and that stuff's really for real. I had several clients where I've seen that they had a propensity for that in the Vedic astrology. And one of them said, I'm in this particular group and it's getting pretty weird and they won't let me out. It's kind of like Hotel California. You can check out anytime you want, but you can't ever leave. Right. And they were doing, see, there's so many texts out there. Like if you get into the Tritimus and the Picatrix and Agrippa, the 3 books and 4 books of occult philosophy, even Paracelsus, all these alchemists and magicians, I think that stuff's really dangerous. In fact, speaking of the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage, he specifically warns against it. And I absolutely agree with him in there. And that is that, yes, you will. In fact, there's texts, the Bahir particularly and others mentioned, yes, you will get some result coercing the supernal beings. But if you make the slightest mistake, you'll get possessed. This is why taking the sacred path and just helping people and trying to push this stuff off and get rid of it is better. I have a quick story I got to tell you that happened to me. I was down in Beverly Hills. We got a little office that we share down there. And my business partner received a chair and a bunch of stuff in from New York. It was being shipped in. And I'm sitting in the room, and I said something that grabbed me right by the throat. And I'm like, oh, my God, what is going on? I could feel it. Man. And she said, well, I just got all this furniture. I said, yeah, it's really shifted in here. I said, that chair over there in the corner has something attached to it. Now, this might sound incredible to people, but I felt it. And I could not get that thing off me. I was doing some banishing techniques, which are very sacred with the angels and sacred geometry. It's like the LBRP and Rosie Cross and all that type of stuff. It's very powerful, especially if you concentrate. It's very powerful. I couldn't get this thing to go. So finally, I did a technique where you draw a Star of David and you force it into it and then you burn it. And that puts it on another dimension. And it takes a lot of concentration. When I did that, the energy started shifting. And I told this person, I said, it's gone. And we could feel it. It was gone. And then I said, got to get rid of that chair. That chair has so many elemental strays on it and etheric energy. It was a beautiful antique chair. I said, get rid of it. She agreed. She goes, let's get rid of it. So carried it downstairs, put it in the alley, and away it went. And that place has been totally clean ever since. Total shift in energy. I've seen this in homes, in buildings, like particularly we had one in New York. In fact, I never physically visited, but what I often do is I have clients take pictures, because with the pictures I have the vibration of the place. And then I'll often use Google Earth to just see the energy in the neighborhood. And one place, it was a very successful restaurant that was moving to another location. And what happened is I had found that in the basement near the coolers, a very old place, it was around back in the 20s and 30s. I think it might even have been built in the 1800s. And I said, something is, because they kept saying, we really got a weird feeling down there. And it was affecting the business once they had reopened. And I said, we got to clear this. And I got, reading the energy, that there was some executions down there. And it was some kind of a organized crime kind of thing where somebody had been executed down in that basement where the coolers were. And that disincarnate soul was still there. And that took a lot of work to get rid of it and banish it and get that particular soul to move on. So there's nothing the same. Everything is individual. And that's why playing around with magic can literally possess people, because if they think these magical squares and all these conjurations and rituals and sigils are going to protect them, they won't. Eventually, I could tell you a quick story about a guy.
You don't have to tell me a quick story. You can tell me a thorough story if you want, because that stuff is important. That's what we want to hear.
because I won't do that to anybody. But I can tell you a story that's true. These guys had gotten their paws on the Goetia, which is in the Bible, by the way. Do you know that the Goetia that Crowley and everybody uses is none other than the 72 angels that are encoded in 3 verses in Exodus?
Shemham Foresh.
And this Shemham Foresh, that's exactly right. And that's really dangerous stuff. In fact, these 72 angels rule each quintessence, which is a 5-degree band of the zodiac around the earth. And there's lunar ones too. So this stuff gets really deep. And these guys had gotten a hold of the Goetic documents, which is none other than Solomonic magic from King Solomon. And they built the building soundproof, and they had everything going. And I heard about this after the fact and warned one of them, don't play with it. Well, here's what happened. They tried the rituals, and what's fascinating is you have to have a circle with a triangle in it, which is 3-sided, which is the square of 9. And, of course, that equals Saturn, see. So Saturn has a lot to do with solidification of energy. So they did all these conjurations and nothing happened. And then all of a sudden there was a boom. And they said their hair stood on end. And this entity said, learn the words. And they freaked out. In fact, everybody in the neighborhood apparently was telling them, what are you guys doing in there? The dogs were barking, and it just had an eerie feeling.
Oh, man.
So then they take it further. They go and they learn all the words and the conjurations, and they come back in and they really go for it a few months later or some period of time later. And they actually got an entity to build itself up in a green mist, and they were able to communicate with it. And this is something that's very common in the Middle Ages. John Dee, Queen Elizabeth's conjurer, is more famous for it, but there was many, many people doing this. And the problem with all this is these entities they think they can coerce them with sigils, but they will possess your aura. There's story after story of people getting occult powers, and then they ended up possessed, and they can't get them off of them. You could destroy your soul with that. And then, of course, we hear
what happened to the men, though?
Well, to my knowledge, I don't know these guys that well, but to my knowledge, the one person I did know, I don't know what they did. I'd never heard the outcome of that, but he got out of there. I warned him. I says, don't get around that stuff. It's really dangerous. This is why the modalities advocated by the old rabbis, and I have to give the religious leaders credit here. They actually cut this stuff out in Rome, I think somewhere in the 1st or 2nd century. They eradicated it. And everyone knows the bottom of the Vatican's probably got one of the best occult libraries in the world. Yeah. Next to some places in India. But they were actually smart to do that, in my opinion, because it's extremely dangerous. And if you really read the entire first chapter of both the translations of the Abramelin magic, he specifically warns against any type of magic. He says the purity of the soul. In fact, here's what's interesting. If you take Judaism, the Passover, which Christianity also celebrates, there are 6 lunations. The Passover starts on the new moon closest to the spring equinox every year. It starts. Those 6 lunations end up at the fall equinox, which ends up being what? Rosh Hashanah. And then, of course, the 7 days of purification. You got Yom Kippur and all that down the line. And what does that mean? That's the celebration at the end of that is when your guardian angel appears to you if your soul is purified enough. And the guardian angel only can give a saint or a prophet the true powers to control these entities, because a human being is not powerful enough to do it. It'll never happen.
You really believe that? You believe that? And you believe that based on the text or your experience with this stuff?
Well, I can just say I know it's true. I absolutely know. In fact, Daskalos, who I've mentioned many times, is probably the most safe, and I would say my favorite modality is the Magus of Strovolos and his teachings. He really had it down. He said, you really, if you purify the soul and you are not playing with magic, you will attract the upper angels. And there's a lot of upper one. Yeah, and that's the way to go, because anyone who thinks that they're going to control entities like that through any kind of a sigil or magical squares and all, it's not going to happen.
Well, Lon Milo Duquette came on the broadcast one time, and he's a member of the OTO and stuff, and he's a great guy. I love the guy. He taught me a lot about the Kabbalah and stuff, but he even said that this stuff is dangerous. Most of the real magicians that I've had on the show will tell you, when I ask them, they say, yes, it's dangerous, period. Right. And he told a story about that when him and his family needed money one time, really bad, and he was in a bad way. And so he did, one of the rituals, and I think he burned his eyes with some cinnamon oil or maybe some abramelin oil. I forget what he called it, but it's oil that you make in the ritual, and he burned his eyeballs.
Oil's right out of the Bible.
Yeah, and he was talking about just the hell he went through during the ritual. Now, after it was over, he never told me any other things that happened to him, but all of a sudden his friend pulls up. I don't think it was that night or maybe the next day, and I guess gave him some money or a car or something. Like, it worked. And he always told me, he said, this stuff is dangerous. You'll go limping away from it, but you'll learn a lesson. And that's all he's ever told me. And so I've never done any of these things, right? But I do read about it a lot.
The best magic is the Psalms. I really do. And remember, I've mentioned the Shemush Tehillim. If anybody wants to get a copy and stick with holy magic, the Psalms, which of course are in the middle of any Bible, the Shemush Tehillim is the Psalms. Tehillim is the Hebrew word for Psalms. And the one that's extant right now in English gets a little criticism because there are some basic mistakes, but not many. It's really quite elegant, because before the Bible was assembled as we know it, these were standalone texts. You had the Torah, you had all these different writings of the prophets, and then you had Tehillim. And Tehillim is the Psalms. Well, in their original states, there was explicit instructions, and they actually showed through the ciphers. And there's many different types of ciphers. You've got the 22 Hebraic ciphers, which are all these various names. And then you have the Akbeker, you've got Notricon, you've got numerology of all kinds that's secretly embedded in there. In fact, speaking of the Shem HaMephorish, there's a psalm. It's Psalm 80 that is encrypted in that 11th verse. That's really quite fascinating, because do you know what angel is depicted in there? The archangel Ratziel. Ratziel on the tree of life is the same angel that was believed to be sent to Adam and Eve at the fall. And the text is the Sefer Ratziel, which is probably the most detailed astrology you'll ever read, about all the angels that shift at sunrise, noon, sunset, midnight. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, if this stuff is dangerous, though, I understand that it's very interesting and compelling, but if it's dangerous, why are they writing the books? Why are the books everywhere? Why do I got people in my chat room trying to figure out what
people are telling it? And I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I'm just here to tell you that, I think this stuff's dangerous from my viewpoint. And I really would tell people to be very careful with any kind of things like that. And the reason why, I mean, let's face it, a sales meeting is an effort in magic. You go into a sales meeting, and what do? It's a form of mind control. They fire everybody up and tell them how great the product is, and pay people to say things that they don't really believe, right? That's a form of magic right there. Prayer is magic.
Right, I understand that, but what I'm trying to ask you is...
Speech and thought is magic. I think life is magic.
I got
It's
you.
divine magic.
But people want to read like earlier you mentioned the Key of Abramelin and the Mage, but nobody can find the Goth translation, so everybody's asking where that
sure
is.
You can. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I got it right here. Let me show you here. Hang on. Jump online and grab that. That's easy. Where did I... I'll find it when I go on a break. I'll grab it off the bookshelf. But that's easy to get. It's a much better translation, and I love it. The guy who really wrote Abramelin is Rabbi Maharil. His grave is still in the City of Worms. The City of Worms, of course, is in Germany, and that city has an interesting history, but many people go to his grave, and he was such a holy man. He totally would tell people to stay away from magic. And the true way to do magic, which you and I were speaking about, Crowley tried it, but he wasn't pure enough to do it. And that is to get the upper angels to come. This is why, and there's so many secrets to this, not that I claim to know them all, but it appears it's not allowed like it was anymore because consciousness has shifted, and it really comes down to your soul. You can't buy it. You have to be an advanced, pure soul. Some of the secrets to this stuff is there were rituals that were done in the Torah that would purify the nefesh. Nefesh is referred to as the lower conscious spirit. And Rosh is the mid-spirit. And then you got Neshma. So you go up to these 5 layers, and they would actually do purification rituals to purify the Nefesh and the Rosh and the Neshma. And if you could purify those through, good deeds, good works, the upper angels would come through to you. The Greeks knew about this too. They actually called it Amphithereon. They said the angels can't get to us because we're so blocked in our consciousness and the elementals that for them it's like going into the sewer. They won't come near us.
Gotcha. I'll tell you what, guys, in the chat room on the Fringe FM, there's also an on-air line in there too as well. So if I see you in there, you can ask Jeff a question if you want to. Also, the call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. It's 1-800-588-0335. Give us a call, text in, whatever you want to do. We'll get to your questions as well. I'm going to talk about a little bit of more stuff with this. The elementals, the crossroad rituals. We're here with Jeff Harman. Don't go anywhere.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Alex X.
Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Get the Tea is the #1 cleansing tea in America. We cleanse you with organic ingredients, and when used daily, you can increase your energy. Cleanse from intruders that set up camp in your colon. Cleanse your colon and feel the difference. Colon cleanses can be uncomfortable. Not Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea is mild yet truly effective. Cleanse your insides every day. Easy to make, easy to use, and feel the results. Are you sold? Okay, then here's how to order. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Look for our specials on the front page. Get the Tea also carries top-rated supplements for those who care about their health. Naturally. Again, log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com and feel the results. And for those of you that arm yourself with information, come to our webinar every other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's every other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific. You can sign up at getthetea.com.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? Cannasense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. Cannasense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the costs, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and Cannasense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
AncientLifeOil.com. For your CBD needs, just remember, AncientLifeOil.com. What does it do for the body, you ask? I can't say to the people in the suits that run the industry. Big Pharma is all over CBD because of its well, you know what I mean. Research the benefits of CBD on Google and come back to AncientLifeOil.com and purchase your CBD today. Non-GMO and all organic. You don't want to be using a petroleum product. You want to be using the cleanest CBD product on the market. AncientLifeOil.com. We even have CBD for your pet. Help your pet's discomfort. Help your discomfort. Log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Newly reduced prices to pass off the savings to the most important person. You. AncientLifeOil.com. And one more thing. We have topicals too. So if you have joint pain and some different issues that are going on in your body, you might want to use a topical. Think about it. AncientLifeOil.com.
Oh, well, welcome back to Lighting the Void. We're here with Jeff Harman. Jeff is, we're talking about clearing space. Sorry, man, he made me laugh coming into here. But preparewiththefringe.com. If you order anything over $100, you get a free T-shirt. And like Jeff was saying, if you and the cockroaches may be the only thing that's left alive, but at least you'll have some food and you'll have a T-shirt, right?
Yours will be a glazing bowl, but you won't be hungry.
Yeah. So
we got an Amber Alert here, Joe. There apparently on the 101 Hollywood Freeway, we have a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, who is absconded with a Toyota, and he's now heading towards Hollywood.
The source is leaving. They remained anonymous, didn't they? I'm sure they did.
They did. But I hear they've got helicopters and police cruisers after him as we speak.
Well,
they claim he hasn't shaved in at least 40 years.
We need a reporter from there for that. There's a Bigfoot sighting every day. But we'll get back.
They caught him on Sig Alert. That's how they figured it out. The cameras on Sig Alert.
They got these books, Jeff. All of these books are revealed, and this is where I get mixed up. Okay, they got all of these books on magic and the Goetia and how to summon this stuff, Enochian magic, how to summon angels, but it's dangerous. Don't do it.
Mighty dangerous, in my opinion.
Why? So why do you read it then? Just so you know how it all works for intellectual reasons?
I have to say, I was really blessed in my life. Again, my mother. I used to have a studio back in the Midwest, and I was hired by a lot of religious organizations to do various different talks and retreats. That's how I met Mother Teresa. I actually filmed and recorded Mother Teresa in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was hired by this particular organization to record a lot of theologians. Some of them were Jesuits, some of them were Roman, trained theologians. I mean, these are really smart guys, all PhDs and doctors. And I would work a lot of times down at Bellarmine Retreat House, which is in Chicago. And I would also I really was blessed because I was exposed to so many different things with my company. And it really got me intrigued. There was one guy, his name was Father John Harden, Hardan or O-N, I think it was. And what a mind. I mean, this guy had such an elegant vocabulary, and I was recording him. And then afterward, I'd get the chance to go to lunch with him, and I would ask him questions. And he was really into the whole theology of exorcisms and some of the golden secrets that the Vatican had because he worked there. He was very high level there. And Malachi Martin was another one who had a lot of dissension with the church. And, of course, M. Scott Peck is another one who got involved with he's the psychiatrist that wrote People of the Lie. So I got exposed to a lot of different really smart people. And when I was even doing the filming with Mother Teresa, I was really intrigued at the conversation at this round table that we had to film and record. And it just really got me intrigued in many areas, and that's why I began to explore this. And I think it goes even back to my childhood. When I was a young boy, my mother always and I were very close. And my first astral travel was, I think it was about 7 or 8. I had these little guinea pigs way down in our yard in this little cage, right? And I'll never forget, the guinea pig's name was Peggy, and I'm sleeping up on the 3rd floor of our house well, it's actually the 2nd floor. And I had a dream. It was early in the morning, like 6 a.m. or something. And I had this dream that my little guinea pig had died and was laying on its side, on its right side. And I jumped out of bed, ran downstairs. Nobody was up yet. And sure enough, opened up the cage. There she is, just laying on her side, dead, exactly the way that I had
you floated
envisioned.
out and looked at it, is what you did, I think.
Well, it was my mother that told me that, and I told her later because I was all crying, a little kid, and we gave the little guinea pig a burial and said a prayer for it and everything. It was really cool, and I got to do stuff like that when my son was born. I love that stuff. It's so great. And anyways, long story short, I told my mother what happened. I says, I dreamt this. She goes, no, you didn't. She goes, you astral traveled. And she says, I always knew that about you because she had my astrology chart. Oh. And my mother was actually a really good astrologer. And she said, and she got quite good by the 70s. She was always playing around with it. And she says, you have that propensity in your chart, which is an interesting thing you and I were talking about on the break. Jyotish astrology is such a fascinating and rich science because Jyotisha is what really is the true name of Vedic astrology. Most people, I'm a Vedic astrologer, but it's really Jyotisha. Jyotisha means in Sanskrit the science of the light of the soul. And now, talk about all this stuff we've been talking about. You can actually see there's divisions of karma that are enladen upon the soul, and everybody drawing breath is here, in my opinion at least, and I think this is quite supported by the Vedantic and rabbinical texts. We're here purifying and rectifying the soul. And it talks about how certain souls are at different places in that evolution. And I think anyone can get there, but a lot of us are laden with certain crosses to bear, if you want to use that analogy, or certain karmic things, both personally as well as our ancestral. And when I do readings with people, they're always fascinated. Well, how'd you know my dad was that way? How'd you know my mom?
Yeah, you did that with me too, actually. But it was freaky. But I think where I get a little bit hung up on this, and I think maybe some other people do, is the whole idea of purifying and purification of the soul. It almost sounds like that old message, and I'm not saying that you're saying that, it just brings up that thought of that old message that you're not good enough the way you are.
No, it's not that. It's more of, well, here's a good example of what I'm trying to say that I think Jyotish offers. Again, I mentioned I have a lot of folks who are into psychiatry and psychology that are really interested in Vedic astrology because it explains things that are there in the psyche that cannot be rationally justified through analysis and questioning. Like, for instance, you can see if there's so many secrets that they're called yogas, and there's also planets that are mathematical in Jyotish astrology, just like there is in Western astrology. And you can see, like, there's one called the Son of Saturn in English. It's some people call it Gulika, and it actually is how the soul escapes from the reincarnational process on Earth. And you can tell by what it's juxtaposed by or aspected or conjunct with where that process might be. There's also things like Kalasarpa yogas, which are serpent curses. And everyone I've ever seen who has it, they have great power, but they cause a lot of trouble, or they're getting a lot of trouble. And in fact, Trump escaped a Kalasarpa yoga by less than 15 minutes on the planet Earth. He doesn't have one, but he's close to one. And look at the power he's got. Whether you like him or hate him, he's got a great amount of power. I mean, right now it's safe to say he's probably one of the most powerful people on the planet, right? Love him or hate him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't dislike the guy, and I'm not promoting the guy. I'm just viewing his chart as what it is, and I see this consistently. So where I'm going with all this is that Vedic astrology allows a deeper analysis of the birth chart of maybe why certain people have a much tougher time, which actually might be a blessing in disguise. There's actually angels. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
and don't get me wrong. I want to clear something up real quick too. I don't like any politicians. Not really. I mean, maybe the smaller, localer ones are good people, but anybody that wants to be president, in my opinion, has got something really wrong with their head. It doesn't matter, Democrat, whatever. So I just want to get that clear.
George Carlin hit it on the head when he said, forget the politicians, you have owners. They own this place. They print the money. But yeah, I agree.
So you're talking Jyotish astrology. You're talking about, look, I know you're knowledgeable, Jeff. I know you're the real deal. You can ask anybody that listens to this show. I certainly
don't know everything.
No.
That's for sure. Nobody does.
No. But what I'm saying is that what we're trying to do is figure this out, right? So when you talk about the Jews and their old books and stuff that's really fascinating text, and we know that it works, and then you talk about the Hindu books and the really fascinating stuff that you know that it works, I start to think, well, where is the truth, right? Where are they getting all of this stuff from? Where did the Jews get their stuff from?
Well, angels. I mean? There's no question about it. They mention it. The Tibetan lamas, the rishis were called rishi in Sanskrit. Actually means seer, and that was where a lot of the Vedas, the Rig Veda, the Bhagavad Gita, many of the secrets all came from that. It's the same thing they talk about. I mean, it's clear. You hear about Ezekiel and all these different saints and prophets who had visits with angels. Listen to Daskalos. I mean, the Magus of Strovolos. He actually outright says it. Father Yohanan grabs my hand on the other dimension and moves it. Or he's going to conduct a lesson through me. See, so this stuff sounds, incredulous in some ways, but it's not. It's really not, in my opinion, because anyone I've seen who truly has spiritual power, not stuff to impress people, but they can actually do things, they have a portion of the sacred holy magic, which is guidance from upper angels.
How many people on the planet
you could buy?
How many people on the planet do you think actually have this knowledge? It's so rare. It's really rare, isn't it? That have this power and this knowledge that have
the power.
matches.
Yes, I think there's a lot of them, and some of them may not be in bodies. I've had the blessing of actually have Daskalos visit me. I never met him personally, but I actually had him visit me once, and I was in a meditation, and I was actually really blown away. He's amazing. I mean, I tell everyone, read the Magus of Strovolos, because that he again stresses how dangerous ritual magic is, especially, a lot of conspiracy theorists, and they're not wrong, have heard about satanic rituals and drinking of blood and all this crazy stuff. I've actually had clients who were subjected to stuff like that. I was the one who said, geez, what happened to you here? And the tears start pouring out. Oh, you wouldn't believe it. They made me. And I'm like, yeah, that was right when you were in a debilitated Mars dosha, during Sati Sati or something. And all these yogas show up. This is why you can't make this stuff up. And
the Satanic Church became an official religion, by the way. So they're getting tax breaks now.
Oh, good for them. This stuff is, I'm not here to judge or, I'm just saying my personal experience is when you start playing with that stuff, you can lose your soul.
And that's what I'm trying to stress too. When I ask these questions, I'm only asking these questions because I know other people are thinking it, right? So it's got to be, I think that real power, real spiritual power, especially the kind that Daskalos had, and this is my opinion as well, which I totally agree, is not as prevalent
he definitely had
as people think. It's a super rare thing, but eventually, do you believe that we all get to that state, or are we all trying to get to that state?
I think most people will get to that state. I really do. I think, what's so fascinating about, they should stop calling astrology. They should really call it astronomy of the soul, because that's what it is. What astrology is, and in fact, prior to the 1700s, that's what they called it. All these people called themselves astronomers. In fact, one of my favorite texts is the Book of Astronomy. It's a 1800 page document written by a 12th century astrologer named Guido Bonatti. And he's hailing all the ancients. And all the scholars can't even find half the people he references. It's astounding stuff. There's electional astrology, interrogation astrology, natal astrology, all the stuff we've been talking about. It's probably one of my more favorite books because it was put together. And you got to remember, this is about 300 something years before the printing press. That took a lot of work to pen almost 1800 pages of work. That's astounding,
Yeah, when you pick up a text, like I've picked up some of these texts that talk about the crossroads ritual, right? The crossroads ritual is a very controversial subject. Some people have talked about how certain music artists have used this ritual to get their way in life, to become famous, things like that. Made deals with certain demons or entities or whatever. And I used to laugh at that, right? Until I looked it up.
That's right there. That is dangerous stuff. That's exactly what you don't want to do.
Until I looked it up, and it's actually a real thing, right? The crossroads ritual, it goes into folk magic. It goes almost back to the beginning of magic itself, where people would find any crossroads and summon a known entity that's known for doing deals. And ours, the biggest one that I read about, was Lucifer. And I'm thinking, well, why would anybody summon Lucifer? Well, to a chaos magician,
stuff is? Burn it. Burn it. You don't even want it around you.
To a chaos magician, though, Lucifer is nothing but a character in a mythology that works. That's the way they look at it.
Go talk to the psychiatrist, M. Scott Peck, and I could turn you on to a few clients of mine who could tell you quite a bit different. I've seen that, and I've had direct experience, not anything I want to experience again. And it's trust me, if people think this stuff isn't real, I literally say, thank God, literally, that the upper angels hold this all in abeyance. Dr. Claude Swanson and I had a discussion. It was really fascinating. In fact, I got some clips I'm going to be putting on YouTube with him pretty soon. And he was really, we had a very in-depth conversation about this, how people, hard sciences, are now coming to the conclusion, because of the way matter changes. And of course, this was discovered way back in the 1700s. I think it was, I forget the guy's name, but it was the slit experiment where they actually observed consciousness was shifted by observation. And I forget what year it was, but in any event, that's something that's been very well known for a long time. And when you look at the structural hierarchy, and Daskalos mentions this as well, he mirrors exactly what the Maharil, Rabbi Maharil, says in the Sacred Magic, that first there's God, then there's the seraphims, the cherubims, and the thrones. There's no astrology up there. That's like hundreds of dimensions above this one.
That's like above Kether, way above Kether or whatever, right?
Well, Kether's the upper Sephiroth of the Tree of. So they say between Sephiroth and the sphere of Keter and Doth is where souls are created.
Gotcha.
Both human and animals and others. And it's quite a divine thing to create the soul. So a lot of astrologers all say, oh, well, you're a Pisces or you're an Aries. And I always laugh at that. I call it love latent cluelessness, because you're not your astrology. I think your karma, and the older documents say this, brought you in at this time to the parents, to the situations, and all the astrological energies is like a snapshot of when your soul was tied to the body at first breath. So, yes, the Linda Goodman Sun Sign books are wonderful for coffee tables and newspaper stuff, but you can line up all the sun signs in the world and look them in the eye. There's not a one the same. And that's what I love about, this whole structure, because astrology doesn't get even the firmaments referred to in the Bible and other spiritual documents don't even form until hundreds of dimensions down. Your soul was created so far above that. And what's fascinating is it's called the Yetziratic dimension. It's the Yetzira. They say there's 49 dimensions and 49 subdimensions. No one really knows, but this is where many people do their path working, and a lot of psychics and intuitives get entities from there. And also that's where many dimensions of disincarnate souls will go. Few of us will arise up into the next, it's called Braya, the next dimensions. Those are truly the upper heavens. And that's hundreds of dimensions below God. And maybe more than that. No one really knows.
That's exactly my point. Because I talked to certain people that practice magic, and they're like, well, I'm a level, it's almost like a black belt system. I'm a level 3-4 on this path or whatever, the tree of life. And I'm like, how could you be? It's only been it hasn't even been 2 years. Like, do you know what you're doing? I had a really good friend that passed away when I first started this show, and it was like one of the first guests I ever had on. And he's what really got me interested in the Kabbalah. His name was Stephen Ash, and he wrote a book called Kabbalah, the 50 Gates. And he really talked about how extensive and how powerful and just how vast the tree of life really is.
No, then it goes up and up. It keeps going up higher and higher. There's many trees of life stacked on top of one another. It's pretty wild.
Man, did y'all hear that? That was some kind of weird sound that went through. I don't know. Did you hear that, Jeff?
No.
That was strange. Something, anyways. I'll let it go. It's probably that Bigfoot again or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. It's now on the 110 downtown in LA. Yes.
But I know. Look, and I've talked to others, chaos magicians, other people that really have gotten my head spinning. Like, I've listened to all sides of this, but I think what we got to know is from our own experience. I think our experience, Jeff, I really believe this is our truth. No matter what books we read, no matter how much we know. And that's why I think you believe in this stuff so much, and you know it to be true, just like I do, is because you've tested some of this stuff, right? Throughout your whole life, you've been doing astrology.
I've definitely had some very divine experiences that really parallel a lot of the things we're saying. I think it was like 78 or something like that. It might have been 1976. I was sleeping in this room, and I had this really nasty entity grab me right by the throat. And it's strange because sometimes I get that stuff. And every cord in my neck was just taut. And I'll never forget, it's like this silver angel came in and just drove it away. And I've had blessings like that a lot, where many people have had instances where we've seen pictures of angels around cars, and that your soul is very protected. And I think the thing that gets it unprotected is screwing around with magic. I really do, especially ritual magic. It's exceedingly dangerous. Anybody trying to do anything with sacrifices and all that, it's the highway to hell, literally. And again, I'm not here to tell anybody what to do, but my personal experiences, every time I've seen in readings, talking to people, or being directly involved in some capacity, that was always a very, you're punching holes into divine protection that was already there. And I could tell story after story. I mean,
you make sense. Look, even scientifically,
get rid of it.
I've had people like Dean Radin on the program that are from the Institute of Noetic Science, and when he wrote that book, Real Magic, we were discussing that. I said, look, everything I've read about this mystery schools, the old stuff, it was they would have you purify or round out your nature or anything before you even attempted to do any type of astral work or anything like that. And I said, well, based on your scientific studies, do you think this is right? And he said, well, I can tell you that, it makes a lot of sense to me, because from their studies, people that just dive in and dabble end up having the worst experiences with this stuff. You know?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. The sacred path is, read the Magus of Strovolos, and the two books I love by him is Esoteric Teachings and Esoteric Practices. And he goes into the theologies of the hierarchies of angels. And this is the exact same thing that showed up by Rabbi Maharil and many, many other texts. The Ari, Rabbi Abulafia, who is probably one of the most revered Kabbalists, and to this day, probably some of the most sacred stuff you'll ever read. Very advanced and kind of dangerous stuff, but very sacred. And they all warn heavily against it. By the way, I fished out that book. If anybody wants the other copy, which is a much more authentic copy, it's called The Book of Abramelin, and it's first published in 2006 by IBIS Press. It's IBIS Press, and you'll find it online. It's really quite good, and it's a direct, I think, cleaner translation. And again, the author is Stephen Guth. It's Guth. Stephen Guth.
Guth.
And
Guth. Okay. They were looking at
also
Goethe. I think that's what messed him up.
Yep. Dehn, George Den. And they both worked on the translation. What's really amazing about this text is he actually went into Egypt, and they found on an old Napoleonic map the place that the Maharil actually stayed. It was a bathhouse called Akkari in Egypt, and it's currently blown over. They might have excavated it now, but it was blown over from the sands, because you got to figure this is the 13th century when this happened. Wow. And one of the things I love about this text is everybody races to the back of the book and looks at all of the sigils and the angels. What's most informative is his history. If you look it up, I've actually researched this. The things he said he did, he would warn people. He'd go into, like kings, he would warn a king, listen, you're offending God. God is going to destroy your kingdom. And the king would, well, that's not, I don't believe in that. And sure enough, it would happen.
Like
or
the book of Daniel. Right.
It's exactly. And this deserves just as much of a read. That's why I love chapters 1 and 2 in this, because he explicitly warns against the dangers of spirits. It's just like the Faust story, where Faust found the grimoire. He summons the demon. The demon says, hey, you got to make a deal with me. You're not protected by a circle. And of course he did. And then he got the magical powers. And what happens? he loses his soul. Well, that same story is in here, but differently, where there's I think a man named Anthony who had cut a deal with a spirit making a ritual, and they found him decapitated with his tongue torn out in a sewage drain. And this is, you hear about stuff like this. I really believe that there's some I've never seen anyone or heard of anyone ending up in a good place like this.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't either.
It's all kinds of crazy stuff.
So we're halfway through this already. I'm getting more questions about the book titles and stuff like that. But look, we'll be right back, guys. We're halfway through the show. We're going to take a break. We're here with Jeff Harman tonight. If you want to call in, it's 1-800-588-0335. If you got a specific question you want to ask Jeff, just call in, right? It's not going to hurt you. We don't bite. I see you. I know you're there. We'll be right back.
Lighting the Void Radio.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of The Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
If you are interested in occult subjects, psychic abilities, symbols, tarot, witchcraft, magic, or anything similarly related, my book Occult Arcana will provide you with a truly objective overview of these topics and more. Written in anything but modern language, Occult Arcana was compiled to help researchers balance their quest for a better understanding of the meanings of and in such studies. Occult Arcana is available in softcover and digital form from www.thesecretteachings.info. All copies can also be autographed if requested. That's Occult Arcana from www.thesecretteachings.info.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
This is Paranormal News. I'm John Jeter. Are those footprints of Yeti? The Indian Army claims it is so. They tweeted a picture of prints found by a mountaineering expedition team at a base camp in Nepal that measured nearly 3 feet long and 15 inches wide. The evidence was handed over for scientific evaluation. The Army says it matches earlier theories of the abdominal snowman. Yeti reportedly dwells in the Himalayas. Nepalese folklore describes the creature as furry and ape-like with a terrifying howl. In the 1950s, British explorer Eric Shipton claimed to have discovered abnormal footprints, and the government issued him a license to hunt it.
It was late in the afternoon on November the 8th, 1951, and Shipton and the expedition's doctor, Michael Ward, were working on a glacier a couple of miles from here. And then suddenly they came across a set of huge footprints that went away from them down the glacier, and it left them completely mystified.
Despite sensationalized claims of his existence over the decades, Yeti is still largely unfounded. Connect with the news at ParanormalRadio.com. I'm John Jeter, and this is Paranormal News.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast where we tell real paranormal experiences of people from around the world. And we also conduct interviews with authors, investigators, psychics, and mediums. Real people, real stories, real fear. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on The Fringe FM. See you then.
To call Joe, pick up the phone, dial 1-800-588-0335, toll free from the United States or Canada. You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
So I think what some of the stuff you've been talking about tonight, Jeff, we're here with Jeff Harman, by the way. Visit the website, jeffharman.com, Harman, jeffharman.com. I had a friend a long time ago when I first started doing this broadcast, Jeff, and probably, well, we'll just call her, I don't know, Shelly, right? Because I don't want to say her name. Probably the sweetest girl I ever knew. And we talked about a lot of this stuff even off the show. We were both kind of fascinated with Crowley and what he was talking about. And just really, I mean, you knew me back then too, so you knew I was reading about this stuff, right? So she called one night and asked me to say, hey, will you convince my kid? This is a random phone call I got. It was probably the craziest phone call I've ever gotten in my entire life. And she asked me to tell her kids, she said, hey, tell my children that this stuff that you talk about on the air is real. Things like magic and astral travel. And it's just the weirdest phone call I've ever gotten. I was like, okay. And so the kids got on the phone and they said, well, what did you do to my mother? And I'm like, I'm thousands of miles away. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, she's having some type of episode where she says that she can hear your voice in her head. Now, look, before you guys start thinking stuff, I'm telling you right now, she's normal today. She was normal before this happened. All right. And she's, like I said, the sweetest, nicest girl in the world. But she was having something serious going on with her. And she started talking about how that she could hear the voice, my voice in her head, tell her that this was all a program or whatever, to run into cars. She ended up going to the hospital. Okay. I mean, I don't want to, there's so many details about the story, but she ended up going to the hospital and the doctors were asking her questions. And she said that she not only could hear me talking in her head, telling her to do certain things, but that she felt like that one of her chakras wasn't vibrating properly and that something was squeezing it and holding on to it. So naturally the doctors thought she was psychotic. Now this really happened to me and it was the trippiest thing ever because I cared about her and I still do, anyways, I finally got the details out of what happened. And I think, and I don't know if she was practicing with magic or whatever. I asked her, I said, did you do a ritual? Did you talk to somebody? And even when she was talking back to me, Jeff, she wasn't making sense. She was saying names like Lilith and Crowley and stuff like that. And it was just the craziest stuff I ever heard.
This is where all this stuff goes. Sooner or later, I even know, in fact, remember the book I mentioned earlier, 30 Years Among the Dead?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is an amazing, that's one of my favorite psychiatric books by Dr. Carl Wickland. What happened is his wife ultimately got possessed and they couldn't get the entity out of her. You see what I'm saying?
Why was it telling her that stuff, though? Why was it pretending to be me and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, now you're getting into areas of spirits rather than just disincarnate souls. And
Her
this
kids
is why,
hated me, by the way. They really thought I did this to her.
Well, this is the problem with screwing around with magic. Sooner or later, people can get possessed by entities or they'll enter their auric field. But see, you got to invite them in. And that's where this stuff happens. I really never, I always tell people, stick with the sacred stuff. Again, the Magus of Strovolos is wonderful. I'll tell you another book that I really like, and I just pulled this out of the break. It's a book by Dr. Joseph Slate. He is a professor, I think, at the University of Alabama. Good book. It was written back in 2002. I got it right when it came out. And he has a lot of great studies on psychic vampirism. In fact, that's the name of the book, Psychic Vampires. And he's using Kirlian photography, or what he also calls is aura photography. And he looks at the left and right sides of auras and so on and so forth, the expansive left and the restricted right. And that brings me to Crowley and what you were just saying. Crowley, to me, was an intellectual genius and a spiritual idiot. And that's where human beings always run amok, right there. That's where the spirits get us. The whole journey into intellectualism gets us drunk with our own arrogance and our own ego. And that is exactly the Achilles heels that human beings will run into playing in any of the sacred realms, because these entities will play on that. They get us more and more drunk. Belial is one, and some of the legions beneath him. They love it when you engage in magic because they're smarter than us, and they always will be. Human beings have to realize we're not that smart, and we're never going to be. In fact, Daskalos, the Magus of Strovolos, has a great expression for the human mind. The human mind is a really divine mechanism at which spirit learns to communicate through our speech and our body and our movements. You know, science is right. They say the neurological impulses go down the spine and move the muscles. Well, they're right. But remember, folks, when we were little kids, we couldn't even walk. It took us a year or more to learn to walk, and it took us a few years to learn how to talk right. That's why babies are so cute. So the human mind is really a spiritual mechanism that comports the spiritual side of us into the physical realms. And the more we get to know in the lower, that's what they call it the nefesh. It's the lower present personality, which they say when you pass on, that reintegrates into what Daskalos likes to refer to as the permanent personality. They actually have very specific names for this. And that's why one of my more favorite texts that addresses some of these things is the Sha'ar Hagilgum, which is Sha'ar or Sha'ar means gate or gates. And Hagilgum means recycling of the souls. And boy, if you ever want to go down the rabbit hole, that one really talks about how all of us are fragments of various portions of the soul of the original Adam and Eve. We're like portions of it. Even the Gita and the Rig Veda, there's certain areas in the Upanishads that refer to these exact same things. In fact, there's professors who have been making correlations between the Vedas and the Torah. And they're absolutely right, in my opinion. And that is, we are souls having a physical experience, and the lower consciousness or ego, often referred to as the nefesh, will ultimately at some point reintegrate. It's a strange word. It's called chaya. It's kind of like a K sounding. And then the upper portion of the soul is yechida. And what's interesting about all this is everybody says, oh, it's Jewish. Well, it's actually sacred divine knowledge. And I will say, I give the rabbis credit, they've held this knowledge, and it's been very sacred. And if you look at astrology, that portion of the soul is gated by the planet Saturn. And you can't make this stuff up. You can see the advancement of souls versed on where the yogas are. juxtaposition off of Saturn. It's really bizarre. I had an old astrologer who long passed away. He did astrology for the Rothschilds and some real heavy-duty people in London, and he took me aside and said, Jeff, he said, you're a Yavana. I said, what the hell is that? He says, you're a foreign-born, non-Hindu astrologer. He says, nobody's going to teach you the secrets of the studies. I'll show you because you got on your moon. And I'm not demeaning the books on astrology, but most of them that we get translated into English out of India and Sanskrit, they're not revealing the true secrets of Nadi, N-A-D-I. It's a profound branch of Jyotish, which really is the science of the light of the soul. And I don't claim to know it all, but I was very blessed to get shown some of the yogas by him. Dr. V.B. Rahman was running around the country here in the 60s and 70s promoting all this stuff, and I've got a lot of his work. Fascinating stuff. And you can't make this up. It's the astrology. I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. This is the real matrix.
Well, I lost a pretty good friend in that whole ordeal, right? I mean, and I know she probably, a part of her doesn't trust anybody now when it comes to the occult or magic. And at the time, this is another question I was going to ask you too. What I did get out of her is that she said she was doing Reiki. And I always thought Reiki was, that's good stuff. That's like white magic. Everybody talks about the healing methods of Reiki, but I think sometimes we open ourselves up to things and we really just don't know that we're doing that.
Well, it depends. It sounds like she might have been doing something else, or maybe she had some kind of a progression or something that was going on that, caused other things to happen.
Yeah, it was very strange, man. I mean, can you imagine getting a phone call from my son saying, what did you do to my dad? And he's saying that you're talking to him in his head, telling him that everything's an illusion, that it's all like a matrix, and that you could wreck your car right now and it wouldn't matter, stuff like that. That's how crazy it was. It just didn't make sense to me what was going on. Even to this day, it doesn't make sense.
Well, again, I have to say, another thing I wanted to point out earlier, and this will be of great interest to people, because there's always been kind of a rift between Judaism and Christianity, that did Christ really exist and all. Well, the Rabbi Maharil, who penned, I think, a very significant document about the soul in the Sacred Magic of Abramelin, particularly that newer, Guth translation, he makes a statement in here that'll really be interesting to Christians. And that is, he says this is the same ancient, sacred, holy magic given down by God through the angels that Christ and the apostles also had. Isn't that an interesting statement to make? Now, this is a rabbinical, very dyed-in-the-wool rabbinical Jew who said that. And we find the same smatterings in other places. It's really interesting stuff. And there's so many secrets in Christianity that I think were sadly hidden or lost that are very fascinating. And so again, why I like Dasklos, he didn't care what religion you were. Neither did the Maharil. He said, it doesn't matter whether you're a man, woman, or child. Doesn't matter what your religion or what your creed is. What matters is how pure the soul is.
You see, that's kind of what I was trying to explain, like real esoteric Freemasonry was about, right? Like they didn't get into, secret societies and new world orders and stuff like that. They had you go through certain types of rituals, but were really just representing certain things on the Kabbalah, but they had you focusing on treating other people the way you want to be treated. It was all about rounding out your nature, like getting the rough edges off of you, purifying yourself. And so I always had the idea, Jeff, that, okay, what is Blue Lodge Masonry? It seems to me like it's an outer school or and this was before I even read about it. It seems to me like this is a place of initiation, kind of, where they're just learning that they need to do these types of things before they can get the secrets. Well, then I read other books where these are just exoteric things. These buildings and these societies and these symbols are all just exoteric representations of what's really going on in the inner realms, and that's where the real mystery schools are.
What Washington, D.C. is referred to as the District of Columbia. I actually call it the District of Criminals, but its original name was the District of Columbia, and still is. I'm just kidding. But the interesting thing is there's all kinds of books about this. That was a French architect, and the Masons built that. That is an Egyptian model temple almost in terms of the way things are set up, the obelisks and the domes and all the various layouts and the geometry of that city.
Think about that one.
You bet.
Yeah. So
yes, and you know what the Pentagon means? That's actually the Sephira of Mars.
I've been telling everybody that on the show for months, and people are like, I don't really understand that. I'm thinking, well, if you study a little bit of Kabbalah, then you'll know that's the actual symbol for war, like the god of war.
Exactly right.
That's where they're getting that power from.
And they knew a lot of interesting things. It's interesting. Speaking about, you were mentioning, the weather being so off, and
I did off the air. Yeah,
I know pretty well that these boys, and I can't mention anything because I do have some clients that are in some very interesting places, and I can tell you they're very aware of the cycles that are going on right now. In fact, this country was formed. The founding fathers were steeped in esoteric masonry and Egyptian stuff, and it's well known that George Washington was as well. And there was cycles that went back all the way to, in fact, this was penned in Egypt, and it was also believed that no one knew this, that the flood was a marker point where there were certain celestial alignments. And from that point forward, I've got some really interesting translations on this. It's called the astrology of the world. And now we're not talking about birth charts. We're talking about the astronomy of the solar system aligning up to Earth's perspective. About every 1,000 years, Jupiter and Saturn will join in the beginning of the tropical zodiac, which is Aries. And then there's mutation conjunctions that happen, not exactly, but somewhere close to 240, 260 years. It may be less, maybe more, depending on the cycle. Well, the one that we had in the early 1700s marked the beginning of a whole new era. And it's pretty safe to say for thousands of years, we're running around on horses, using catapults and, oil drums to dump on people and all the other hideous stuff that went on. And all of a sudden we go into steam, electricity, and rails and high-tech mass manufacturing. Look at Benjamin Franklin and others who brought all that in. By the 1800s, we were beginning to really understand electricity. And of course, by the 1900s, oh my God, look where we're at. It's astounding. I mean, if you took somebody from 1850 and dropped them in the middle of modern society, they'd probably think they were on a different planet. I mean, what we have right now is astounding. And the astrology showed that. The beginning of the Industrial Revolution happened right in the 1700s. Well, here we are. We are now on the winter solstice of 2020. We have the next mutation conjunction. It's exactly on the winter solstice. Now, other astrologers have argued, but not in the sidereal zodiac. I say yes, but in the tropical, look at it. It's like to the T exact, right on the winter solstice of 2020. And what does that mean in plain English? I think it's going to usher in a high-tech age. You think we're seeing AI already? Wait. I think we're going to see flying cars in the next 10, 15 years. Look at Tesla. They can completely drive on their own. Do you think the military doesn't have stuff that would blow our hair back? I mean, they've already got jets that can get across this planet in exceedingly fast times. They were flying out of Arkansas and dropping bombs in 2003 over in Iraq, coming back and refueling. Now, You got to be moving to do that.
Yeah, you do. You got to be booking it.
You bet. They're booking it. And I've seen it. When I lived in Tucson, my son and I would swim in the swimming pool, I would hear jets coming over us so fast, and I'd look, I couldn't see him, and there was a dot disappearing over the horizon. I went, man, that dude had to be doing Mach 2 or 3. And I heard from a guy at Raytheon, he says, well, we're not supposed to say this, but he says, we throw gas over the wings so we don't create sonic booms at lower altitudes anymore.
Everybody's been hearing that stuff too here lately. Everybody. In my state,
this was
especially
16 years ago.
Yeah, but they're hearing it again now in my state, all over the place. Up in the Ozarks, they've been hearing it. Booms, just crazy.
Oh, yeah. If they don't have the gas, I hear it does it. But you got to remember, I think they've got stuff now that would blow our hair back. And I can tell you,
aliens, but they're not. That's what I think. Yeah.
We're about to see some amazing stuff happen. And the astrology, the other one that's the problem is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction or cycle. World War I began on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. It was real close to it. It's not exact.
About to hit another one of those?
You bet. And let me explain to you. Then the stock market crash happened, and of course Woodrow Wilson sold the country to the bankers right when all that happened, when the owners came in.
What's happening right now with China? Think about that.
Empires fall and change on these. And what's interesting, just to give people, I'll bring you up to now rather than go through the whole history of Saturn-Pluto conjunctions, but 9/11 happened on the opposition. In fact, Nixon took us off the gold standard at the beginning of the last one. And Reagan, the fall of communism, all happened right in the process of the last square in conjunction. So, and look at the Soviet Union broke up. And all kinds of other things happened that the mind control news doesn't tell us. So what's interesting is 9/11 happened on the Saturn-Pluto opposition. The banks crashed in 2008 and 9, the housing market. And now we got the conjunction. When? January 12th of 2020. This is why our weather patterns are all over the place. And this one's more intense because everybody's heard of eclipses, but there's actually what we call ecliptical patterns of each planet. See, our Earth goes around the sun at its latitude, and when the sun and the moon and the Earth align, that's when you get eclipses, solar or lunar. Well, in the outer planets, or all the planets, they all have their angular orbital pattern. And when that meets the Earth, that's called a node, a point of joining. Well, Saturn and Pluto are eerily close to the Earth's node on this conjunction. So this is powerful. This is why I really think the owners put Trump in there, or let him get in there, because he's got the kind of chart who's going to do what he's doing, and that is
the war chart.
Really yank the chains. Yeah. And
Mars big time, right? You told me this on the show before.
No, Trump has a Raj Yoga Mars in the ascendant. And again, why he's got so much power is because he's escaped a Kalasarpa yoga by literally 15 minutes of birth on the Earth.
Wow. Well,
moved past the node.
We got a phone caller here. I believe Josh is on the line. Are you there, Josh?
This is Josh.
Hey man. You got a question for Jeff?
Yeah, well, a lot. So I'm going to try to keep it short, though. So Jeff, this has been amazing. So I really appreciate everything you talked about tonight. Just the depth. So there's just so many different things. I have some stuff I wanted to ask around the Rudolf Steiner system, if you know anything about that at all. And if not, I can.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I thought he was right on.
What was that? Okay. Yeah,
I like Rudolf Steiner.
I guess one of the things you said was really interesting to me was something about Saturn, and his work's so deep. There's so much of it. I don't really understand a lot of it, but there's this kind of idea of this consolidation around Saturn that he has in there. So, can you elaborate on that at all to me? Or, I guess my other thing that I thought was really interesting is that you were talking about this change in about 2020, and there is something that I have read a little bit more about around that system, which is one of the kind of the I don't want to say deities, but one of the kind of negative, major negative forces. He has a system where it's Lucifer and Ahriman, right?
Yep,
and
exactly right. And he's pretty close there too.
We've potentially moved into this age. I don't want to keep saying his name to give it any power or anything, but a lot of people are saying that the singularity and all those things are kind of this idea of complete rationality above any spirit, right? And that's sort of what I've got from that. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on that, and then if I can just after you're done with that, I just wanted to squeeze in one more thing about the idea of timing when it was about the nadis, and with kind of how in the book of Albermelin there's a lot of focus on timing. So that's all I got.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. Time is interesting because there really is no time, but there is for us embodied on Earth. I mean, we're really spiritual beings incarnate. But to your first thing on Saturn, I always love to point out that all the glyphs of the planets, if you study them, are combinations of the circle, the crescent, and the cross. Look at Saturn's glyph; it's the cross over the crescent of the moon. Jupiter is exactly the opposite, the crescent of the moon over the cross. So the cross means concretization or solidification on the four elements. So Saturn, interestingly enough, is like the karmic gunny sack for each soul, but it's specific to that soul. So a lot of people say, Saturn's in the sky. And it seems like, yes, it is interacting with us, but it's individual to our karma. So there's a spiritual counterpart on different dimensions is what the ancients believed. And I think they're absolutely right. So Saturn has so many interesting spiritual significations in a chart. And I'm actually blown away at how the Nadi and Jyotish astrology viewed that from such a high level of spirituality on the soul. And the Nadis are very fascinating because many people may have heard of the Nadi palm leaves, where you would literally have your name and your birth date, and they could look up at your soul. Well, a lot of that was lost, and it's fragmented now. But there's actually a direct method of Nadi astrology. And I've had the blessings of being with a couple really amazing teachers, and they just blew my mind. It's like, no, Jeff, look at this. Jupiter is the expansion of the soul. Saturn is the restriction of the karmic releases. He said, you just watch Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. You'll pinpoint everything that's going on in time and release. And boy, are they right. Man, that's just stuck with me. I actually have one quite fascinating text on that. And again, the outer planets of Saturn and Jupiter and Mars are really all they use. And boy, it works. I have to say that. It's very profound. You really get that this is a spiritual matrix.
Didn't you have a question, Josh, about is that something about Nadi is Ida and Pingala or something like that?
Well, yeah. So that's when how I've heard of the Nadis was the idea of Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, which is kind of this idea of some sort of tantric breath. And
yep, exactly right. There's so many branches of Vedanta. Yep, you're into Tantra there. That's right.
So
fascinating stuff.
I guess the only other thing I can squeeze here. Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is just one thing with the Daskalos stuff. This has always been fascinating because when I read the Magus of Strovolos, there was that really kind of cute story about how Daskalos befriended the little demon. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know it well. Yep.
Turned it into a little good guy. So,
yep. He made him tend his flower garden. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. I've read both the esoteric teachings and the esoteric practices, and I just don't see much about those kind of entities and how those are formed. Is there anything that I'm missing? Because, I've also read about 90% of Daniel Joseph's book. I'm still going through that. And I just haven't seen much about those kind of jinn-type guys or any of those.
No, you won't. See, Daskalos brings you to the river, and he basically gives you the secrets to what he calls exomatosis or astral travel. And I think he's smart because Daskalos, in my opinion, was probably one of the more advanced people who ever got published. I think there's many around us. There's many ascended masters, and they're not interested in impressing us. And most of them, this is why, again, I'm glad you brought this up, because I wanted to make this point earlier about magic. Human beings have to realize we ain't smart enough, and we're never going to be in this gray matter that we're incarcerated into, using that. Intellectualism is actually, in a way, what's incarcerating humanity. We're drunk with technology, and yet the ancients loved, and there's nothing wrong with technology. I like taking the car to the store instead of walking. But my point is it's some way de-souling us, because we're becoming so infatuated that we've lost the spiritual connection to who we really are. When we all exit this body, we'll never take anything with us other than our spiritual growth. And it's actually kind of dangerous not to realize that. And that's why Daskalos, the more people study the saints, the prophets, and people like Daskalos, you'll find the more humble they are, because they know how vast and divine the upper realms are. And they also know how evil the evil spirits down here are. And they really are. And they're very dangerous. This is why the religions were actually quite right in a lot of ways. Not that I agree with everything they did, but I think there's the general tenets of sacredness, holiness, and purity is really the way to go. And some people may scoff at that, but the danger is the ego. And Daskalos, you'll see how humble he was. This is why in Esoteric Teachings and Practices and some of Daniel Joseph's books, these guys know better than even get you to go down that road.
Yeah, they don't talk about it. They
very dangerous road.
And that's something else I wanted to ask you about too. But we got to go into the break. You got one real quick question,
If you get in touch
Josh?
with a real angel, you will never learn as much. There ain't nobody. And, I can tell you, the more I know I don't know.
I understand that. You got a quick question there, Josh? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, all I wanted to say is Joe knows how much I think I've mentioned this before, I'm a little afraid of the idea of exmatosis or astral traveling, but, maybe I should just hit those books a little bit harder with the stuff and keep doing it, because I'm not interested in ritual magic to do my will any longer, but I just really appreciate your thoughts on everything, and thanks for the great talk.
Sure. Well, one last issue on that. The section in the book Esoteric Practices, that he teaches you how to move your hand, and then he teaches you how to move the same hand with what he calls the etheric double.
Yeah.
Those are the secrets right there. See, people think they're imagining this stuff, but with focused concentration, like he has you study nature and draw pictures, what he's really doing is teaching us to train the mind's ability to create elementals. And what happens, true exmatosis, is when you create your etheric double and you pour your consciousness into this. A lot of people will spend lifetimes learning this stuff.
Right on. All right. Thanks for your call, Josh. I really appreciate it, man. Good questions. We got to take our break here. We'll be right back with Jeff Harman. Don't go anywhere.
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing this journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, my old china plate, Joe Roop, and his guests on Lighting the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you be the Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling. The ground shook. You could hear rushing water. And then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails. Stores with their shelves stripped bare. ATMs can't operate. Deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137. Now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247. Now only $147 shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM. Start your evenings with The Fringe FM long before those other shows get started. Exclusively live on The Fringe FM, hear the Quantum Hologram Matrix with the Reverend John Polk, Tuesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. And our newest show, Sci-Spy Radio with Suzanne Ross, Wednesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. Then stay up because we're burning the midnight oil well into the morning hour. The truth is out there, and so are we. Lock it in, The Fringe FM.
I want to thank Josh for calling in. If you guys got a question for Jeff, you can call in as well at 1-800-588-0335. Tonight, we're with Jeff Harman, who's an astrologer, esotericist, a spiritualist. I would call him a mystic. He's got many names. I call him a mage, although I don't know if he likes to be called that or not. Jeff, do you like it? Do you not like it when people call you a mage? I consider you that. I mean, back in the day, all astrologers were mages, man.
The truth.
What's that?
Researcher of the truth.
There you go. Researcher of truth, right? But you're also in a way, though, you're a practitioner, right? If you go out and clear bad spirits from people's property or wherever, you're somewhat, in my mind anyways, some type of a magician, even though I know there's a negative connotation to that because you and I understand the difference between black and white magic. But I think it's just another name. It's just another label. For...
Yeah. And I find a lot of times properties, I had one place I cleared up in Montana that was really interesting. I told the owners, that's really a fascinating thing. They had all kinds of trouble there, and they were getting a lot of problems from neighbors and lawsuits and crazy stuff. And I actually got that the Native American spirits were part of the problem because they weren't like honoring some higher things. And they did that afterwards, after I told them that, and things really started going well. And we actually did put some really sacred texts. I have found that there are certain gematria in scripture that you can put in. They're actually angelic vibrations that resonate, and we would actually bury those on the property, and it made a big difference. I've done that in a lot of places. We've done them in restaurants, and you'd be surprised how many businesses I've done where we've tried to improve the energies by like grand openings with electional astrology, and then we'll clear it and put energies in there. I had one restaurant where we did yantras, and it made a huge difference. Even the Bodhi tree, which was successful for years, had a Sri yantra in the window, and they only closed down because the guys got too old to run it, and they couldn't find anybody else to take it over. But they did such an amazing business there for years, for like 30 years or 25 years.
Well, I wanted to tell everybody too, real quick, because you got a lot of people out there that really follow your work and they like you. And again, I'll say this. Jeff was one of the first guests I had on the show, and it was because of the things that Jeff said that really got me diving into a lot of this stuff. Honestly, I don't even think you know that, Jeff, how much you inspired me to look into these things. And so Jeff and I have been talking, and he's actually willing, and it's a blessing to us, but he's willing to come on the program a couple of times a month to talk to us. So I appreciate that, man. We'll do, if it works, we'll keep doing it. If it don't, but you just got so much knowledge to share, people, that I think that's a real blessing for you to be able to do that for all of us, Jeff.
Oh yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. I always enjoy going on the air with you. You're really a lot of fun to be with, and you're great at really evoking good questions and responding. You don't have a big ego, which is great.
Not yet, but I'm getting there. No, I'm just playing. Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to mention something if I can.
Sure.
This book I mentioned earlier, Psychic Vampires by Dr. Joe Slate. Here's some interesting proof that thoughts are literally things, and the power of prayer and projection. He did a double-blind study in this book. In fact, I use this a lot for protection in places. You can go get some crystals, just regular, pure quartz crystals. They don't have to be big. You get 4 of them. And what he would do is, and this is actually a very old ritual, where you can cleanse it 3 times under water and pass it over incense 3 times, and then of course pass it above a candle 3 times. In fact, I do gemstones for people, and I prescribe for your Vedic chart specific gemstones that you should wear and not wear, and we cleanse them that same way, and I actually set them at good times. So anyways, get back to this ritual. He did a double-blind study where he took a bunch of students, and they all wrote out goals, and half the group just wrote out their goals and they pursued them, and the other half took these crystals, cleansed them 3 times, 4 crystals, and then laid them out on silk, and they made a prayer out of their intentions and goals, just like the other students did, but they just wrote down their goals. And they would pray that their thought forms or their energy, just like Dr. Emoto proved, thoughts are literally things. He's proving it by freezing it in water, or Chris, now he's passed away. So that's what the crystal does, is it holds your thoughts. And then they would go outside to the 4 cardinal directions, east, west, north, and south, and they would find a tree in those directions, and they would ask the tree spirits, if they push the crystal down into the roots, would the tree amplify their intentions up through the tree branches up into the air and radiate it out for them. Now, this all might sound crazy. This was a scientific study done by Dr. Joe Slates in the book, Psychic Vampires. And what happened is, invariably, the students who did the crystals with the prayers and the goals impregnated into the crystals fared almost 2-to-1 compared to most of them. There was a couple that did very well. It's all the statistics are in the book. But it was unanimously better with the people who did it with the crystals. Now, that is a form of prayer, or someone might call it white magic. I think it's really fascinating, these kinds of studies and how accurate they are. And I can personally attest this kind of stuff for healing, for helping people, and for the good of whatever you want to do, not to negatively influence people, is very powerful. Very powerful stuff.
What do you think?
In that book.
Yeah, and that's another thing I like too, is like you are always promoting other books that we need to read. That's how I really got into this to you too, because that was something that you don't hear from a lot of guests all the time, but you just spit these books out. I mean, I didn't even know what the Sefer Yetzirah was until you brought it up the first time. And I was like, whoa, man, this thing is like the Hebrew version of the Matrix, right? It's telling us this 3D thing that we're in, you know?
Yep.
And so when I look at these ancient Hebrew texts, I guess you could say, I asked you this question earlier, where they get this from, and you said angels. Well, then I wonder
they
about.
Say so.
I wonder about the Book of Enoch, though, because see, that book has been referenced so much, and yet it's not in the biblical canon. And
well, J.J. Hurtak, you know, that's very mysterious. I know him, and I've met him, and that one I won't say too much about, but I find there's some questionable things in there.
Yes, but it's like it's in that story that the angels came down and they gave us heavenly secrets like makeup and steel and doing herbal magic, I guess you could say, or alchemy or whatever. I'm probably butchering it to death. I hadn't read it in so long. And so these were heavenly secrets that we weren't supposed to know, and then they got punished for it, and then they slept with the daughters of men. And this is the whole narrative going on right now, especially in the ufology community. That everybody thinks that the Anunnaki came down here and that they breeded with humans, and then there was the flood, and now there's us, and now that's where all these aliens are coming from. Now, I brought this up to Daniel Joseph, and I almost felt bad because I felt like he got upset, and I was kind of like, man, maybe I shouldn't have asked that question. But I asked him about aliens and entities because I think that they're interfacing, right? Because a lot of these UFOs we see, they just disappear. They're like lights that disappear. Yep. And I said, have you ever talked to or met, or do you know for a fact that there's aliens? I actually forget the question, but I knew it was of that nature. And he paused like he didn't want to answer it. And he said, yes, but he was kind of nudging me. Let's get on to a different subject. Like he didn't want to talk about that. And I always wondered why. I don't know. We wonder if aliens are a threat, if they're a good thing. What's your take on all that? Are they involved with the spiritual stuff?
That's a good question. I think that's a really vast subject that I cannot state that I know. But
no, I mean, what's your opinion on it?
Well, my opinion is that some of them actually may beat extraterrestrials. You want to hear a good story? I was at Fox Studios. My wife was in a movie with Christian Bale. You probably heard of it. It's called Vice. It was about Dick Cheney and all that. And so we got invited to Fox Studios, and we were doing this red carpet thing, and Samuel Jackson and a bunch of other people were there, great people. And I got talking to this Marine who, I don't know how it came up, but we got on some subject, and he was telling me how they actually see out in Malibu. It's right off what we call Zuma Beach. It's Point Doom. And in fact, that's actually where the original I Dream of Jeannie, there was an episode of Gilligan's Island, and many things have been filmed out there, a lot of car commercials. And underneath that, it's been well known, there is a huge drop off, and there is this portal. And they've been tracking stuff coming in and out of there a lot. In fact, I used to teach a physics class a long time ago, back in the 80s. for CEUs, continuing education units. And one of the students in there said, "Oh, my dad's an admiral. And we used to take, he said he used to, not him, but he said his dad said we used to go under there with submarines all the way up damn near to Salt Lake City." So something really heavy duty is going on there. And there is some theory that the government has been involved with these things since Philip Corso, which is in the 1940s. You know, everyone heard about Roswell and all that. Lieutenant Philip Corso was one of the main guys who came clean with all that. So, and right after that, what happened? All of a sudden we see transistors and all kinds of integrated circuits, and microprocessors started coming on the horizon. So there's definitely some pretty interesting stuff. And some people believe that it's extraterrestrials, and some people believe that it's angelic forces, or you could say demonic forces. I personally think it might be a little of both. It's so complex, I don't think we'll ever figure it out. I know I used to drive from Tucson to Los Angeles all the time because we used to live in Tucson for a while, and I really like Tucson. And in the Southwest desert, I'd be going along and I'd pull over to Wayside, and 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd look up and see something just flip right over the mountains. I mean, just a streak. I mean, if I started getting into UFOs and I told you the stuff that I've seen since I was a kid, I've had missing times. I had a motorcycle that actually the electricity was completely shut off, and the next morning it ran. And I had another individual see the same craft that I saw about 5 miles back when the bike went out. So really bizarre stuff. So I think that is a deep subject that
that's my biggest curiosity. How does that, or one of my biggest curiosities? And I know anybody that claims to know the answers to that stuff, man, I just run from, because I know they can't know, you know.
Well, that's just it. I really think there's wormholes. I think there's time travel. I think there's all kinds of stuff going on. I've had the blessing of working with some, I'll just say, military remote viewing groups where they've been interested in why certain times the targets are very accurate. And we did a very deep analysis into astrology on several occasions, and fixed stars, when certain terrestrial locations of the Earth at certain times of the year were lined up with certain constellational fixed stars. Really interesting phenomena. So there's all kinds of stuff going on that seems to be all the above. You've got the potential of extraterrestrials who are very benevolent, maybe some aren't. You've got demonics playing in that realm. I've seen clouds that were there in a clear sky, and boof, the cloud's gone. There's also a lot of military stuff going on.
No doubt about that. No doubt about it, man. I watched.
These boys are pretty advanced.
I watched the UFO Seekers channel. It's pretty much the only UFO video channel I can depend on because I know that this stuff's not fake. And I've seen there's more military stuff going on than we think. Right? We think are alien craft, but aren't. But then, you know, he also took a photograph, Jeff, of this orb thing that was moving so fast they can only grab it with a still picture, and it was kind of amberish color, and it came in broad daylight and then just kind of disappeared. It went into the mountain and disappeared, and I was like, what in the hell was that? And so I always wondered if some of these spirits are interfacing. What we call paranormal activity is spirits interfacing from the unseen realm into this realm or dimensions.
And they
or whatever.
can too. They can manifest into all kinds of objects. It's really deep stuff. I know, like up in Colorado, there's that ranch. I was actually asked to do some research by a MUFON director into everything from Travis Walton to we looked at Snippy the horse and cattle mutilations. And there's a place up in Colorado, that ranch. Oh my God, it'll blow your hair back, the stuff that's going on. These are scientists out there with technical measuring things. It's irrefutable. This is not hocus pocus. This is not smoke and mirrors and incense. This is literally happening. And the government's well aware of this stuff. And there's some that are very knowledgeable, and they're NASA is really interesting. A lot of people don't know this, but L. Ron Hubbard Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley used to do sex magic out there by Devil's Gulch or Devil's Pass out there. Pretty wild stuff. That Parsons, they just did a series on him, which I was expecting to be really, it was very well done, but it certainly did not get into any of the really deep occult stuff that
they are into. In the second season, starting June 13th. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen the previews, and it shows them out there in the orgies and stuff, and Parsons is in there. I'm like, yeah, they're going to get into it now. That first season was just them getting into the order,
That's a deep rabbit hole there. That's what I'm saying. That stuff is dangerous as hell. It really is. And I stay far away from that stuff. I'm just interested in helping people. And
I know you are, and that's why I brought up that you were going to be on here more often. People really like your stories, and I think a lot of times we don't get to hear your experiences and your knowledge because you get on a radio show, you only got a couple hours, and you're trying to get all the stuff out at once. So I figure, if we give you more time on here, you definitely got the voice for it, even though you don't. I don't know if you believe that or not, but you got the radio voice, man. You guys don't know how much I've been trying to get Jeff to do his own radio show, but he's so busy with his clients, he just can't most of the time. You're a busy man, Jeff.
Yeah, well, I like doing your show. Yeah, again, I like you. You got a great attitude, and you're very humble, and you're not, you don't come off like you know everything. And I know I don't. And the more, that's why I always caution people, do your research, because I'm humbled all the time by this stuff. And clearing people and entities, I'm very careful with that because I've gotten really sick. It's actually very dangerous to do. It's interesting. I had a client, I can't mention where, in another portion of the world, who was involved with some very well-known people screwing around with magic. And this person has had so many health issues since then. And I can see it in the astrology. And I actually was warned not to clear him because of all the stuff that was going on. So I sent him to another dear friend of mine who I've been working with for years, and she didn't want to do it either. So this is the problem with getting involved with this stuff. There's some very deep stuff that can happen to your soul. And I always tell people one of the most powerful things to do is read and become knowledgeable. But the Psalms, like Psalm 91, is such a powerful psalm to clear the soul. You read the last verse of 90, which is the very final verse of Psalm 90, the work of our hands establish it. You read that 3 times, and then you read Psalm 91. Psalm 91 was known. In fact, Abramelin mentions it in with the Maharil. He said that you should know by heart, and it will drive entities away. Like Psalm 40 will purify the aura. And here's the secrets. If people get the Shemush Tehillim, there's actually the angels encoded in cryptology in the Aramaic or Hebrew, if you will. And you're actually supposed to scan the Hebrew from right to left, and then you do it backwards. And the old method was to do it right and left, forward and backwards 3 times. And there's a reason for that. There's codes in that stuff that actually impregnate. Like Dr. Emoto has proved, and they're still carrying on his work, that certain vibrations and music and sigils will have a real effect on water, and of course the water is used as a medium to freeze it and show it. But the same thing happens when you do that with your eye, and you make intentions and prayers. That's why healing really does work, and this is what Daskalos teaches in the esoteric practices: is how to train your mind to focus on creating strong intentions and etheric, what we call vibrational projection out of the third eye chakra. And these things are very, very powerful. And the Psalms, goes back to creation. This is very sacred stuff. And again, if the religions were as interested in teaching people about this, why did they extract that information? They totally neutered the Shemush Tehillim and smacked it in the middle of the Bible.
Yeah, which makes me wonder about the whole Nicene Creed thing, right? Like what was going on there?
Well, these people were murdering each other between the 3rd and 5th century, to decide what Christians would get to believe and see.
There's a real good movie about that. Have you seen that movie, Agora? They kind of represent that a little bit there.
Oh, no, that one I haven't.
Yeah, it's about the philosopher Hypatia. And they were at the Temple of Alexandria, and it showed how the Jews and the Christians and the pagans were all just going at war and killing each other.
They were.
It went bad.
I know that from historical documents, but I didn't know they did a movie on it. That's great. Well, there you have it. See, and this is the problem. Sting actually said it right. People go crazy in congregations. They only get better one by one. And he's so right on that statement. It's an individual thing on the soul. They say when we exit the body, the angels can see into your soul. And this is a very mysterious thing about the Shem HaMephoresh. They actually call them the Lords of Destiny. There's angels that are embedded in this whole lower hierarchy that seem to work with the upper angels who, see, Daskalos mentions this. There's an order from the thrones. It's a very, very high angel, way above astrology, that guides the souls down into creations. And, of course, the earth is one place only. And I think there's many that are far beyond our awareness. And I also think there's many dimensions that this can happen, which may or may not be parallel, in terms of what we call time. And what's fascinating is these angels appear to work on what that soul needs. So astrology is none other than a reflection of what you were brought into. That's the only reason you can do a reading and see what time you're in, what events are likely to happen. It doesn't predict the future, but it predicts when the energy is going to release in what we call time. And then the free will actually is how we would react to it. And therein is the magic right there of life, in my opinion.
What about, and I'm going into over at Spreaker, going into that chat room to look, and they're asking, what about children? How come children can, we all have these theories about why they're better at clairvoyance and clairaudience and stuff like that. But in my experience, my own experience, and from testimonies from friends and relatives, it seems like children get messed with a lot by, I don't know if they're elementals or evil entities or whatever they are, but there's something trying to put fear into children from a young age.
That gets into the nefesh. The nefesh is what we call, psychology might call it the conscious mind or the lower portion of the self. They say, this is really fascinating, again, the Shari HaGilgum and other texts, the Nefesh Hasitzim talks about this. That's a book specifically about the restriction of the spirit into the gray matter of the brain and the body. And that is a really interesting text, too, where it says the first 7, there's 7 planetary periods that we all go through each 7 years. And science is the same thing, that from every 7 years, all your cells change. But the year 1 is from birth to 1, you're in the sun period, the sun year. Then from 1 to 2, you're in the moon. See, the seed is the sun, the moon is the crucible where it nurtures the seed. And all the way up to 7, the 7th year of life is Saturn. And notice what happens. The baby teeth start getting loose. The child's, in school, a lot of things start shifting. The old rabbinical texts say, and the Egyptians too, I might add, and Chaldeans say that there's what we call abures, is one word for it. And abure is you are joined by either another soul or another spiritual angelic entity. And they're all varied. They join the soul every 7 years. There's a shift. And what happens at the next 7 years? And you got to see this chart. The first 7 years is the sun. The second 7 years is the moon. And, of course, what happens at 13 years old? puberty. That's why everyone knows about bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. That's why they have them. And that's not unique to just Judaism. The Brahmin caste in India did the same thing, the Tibetan lamas, and I heard that there was old rituals in other cultures that had done that. In the Tamil, where they knew that was the pivotal point. Not only does puberty and genetics really shift, but also you move into 7 years of Mars. And even the insurance companies know that. Teenage boys will hit Mars on the 16th through 17th year. See, because 14 to 15 is a sun year, but it's what we call sun Mars. And then 16 to 17 is where they hit Mars. I'm sorry, 13 to 14 is the sun, 14 to 15 is the moon, and yeah, that's right. And then 16 to 17 is Mars. I'm not looking at the
chart,
about but if you saw it.
I'm wondering where I'm at now.
It never stops. See, and when people retire, when you hit 63, you hit the same Mars period that you had when you were in 13, except now you're 63. See, so yes, I show these in readings with people. I always look at people's planetary periods. Here, let me look at you here. Hang on a second. Yeah, it's called the calculation of the 7 planets for the years. 37, you are in a Mars year. 37 to 38, you're in Venus Mars. So next birthday, you'll hit 38. You'll hit a Mercury year.
Okay. Saturn freaks me out. As long as I'm not doing that, I'm good, I think.
Well, everybody goes to that barbecue every 7 years.
But does it have to be a barbecue? I mean, what I mean is like, isn't Saturn really showing us like, look, man, here's your karma. Just do this stuff. This is what you need to work out. Do this, and your life will be better. Your spirit will be better. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like the father that we're not listening to sometimes.
Well, that's where astrology readings are so valuable. I spent like 30, 40 minutes charting nobody is the same. I mean, when you look at what we call primary directions and secondary progressions and doshas and all these ancient types of astrology, it's profound. Nobody is ever going to have the same experiential reaction to their progressions and transits as someone else, because everyone is uniquely individual. And here's another thing. Our solar system is rocketing around a central sun at just short of 500 million miles an hour. It takes 26,000 years. They say it's about 25,800 something years, and they may be right on that one. And that's called the Great Year. It's also known as the precession of the equinoxes. Now, 26,000 years is a long time. Yeah. So you could never get the same chart twice. Virtually impossible. When you look at all the variables of A, where you're born on the planet, secondly, you got the whole damn solar system going around a central sun at that speed. I mean, it's almost beyond analysis how complex it is.
I get a question in the Fringe FM chat that's asking, what would be a similar word to use instead of angels with what he is speaking about? Or would it remove the meaning by naming it something else? I think what they're trying to get at is they're saying they're entities or watchers or aliens. Sometimes I wonder if people want them to be what they think it is too, you know? Like some people want it to be angels. Some people want it to be aliens. It could be the same.
I think that person's asking a really good question, because it's really fascinating to read and study the hierarchies. There's not just angels. There's spirits, there's intelligences, there's then elementals, there's disincarnate souls. And then just taking the word angel is kind of a Western term that we use for, in the other cultures, they call them deities, or they will refer to them as some classification in a language that connotates between good or evil. It's like we'll say angels for good angels, and we'll usually say demons for bad, or spirits for something that's of a lower foot soldier. Like take nature spirits. You have the elementals of the sylphs for the air, or the fairies, if you will, and you've got the gnomes for the earth, and you've got the undines for the water spirits, and the salamanders. And there's and it's earth, air, fire, and water, and they're believed to be ruled by the 4 archangels of creation, which I absolutely think is true, which is Michael for fire, Gabriel for water, Raphael for air, and Oriel for earth. So, and above them, you have all these angels that are ordering creation, and you can't make this stuff up. One of the most compelling documents on that is again, the Sefer Ratziel, which is actually a text that talks about these just overwhelmingly complex angels that literally work with the rotation of the earth, sunrise, noon, and sunset, the seasons, the ingress of the sun into all these different places of the zodiac, and the solstices and equinoctial points, the lunar angels. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And, you can't make this stuff up.
I had another guy on here, Nineveh Shadrach, who told me that what we were calling angels was actually is all jinn. Like he was saying that everything was jinn. And I was like, where did he get that from? And I think that comes from more of an Eastern Islamic look on it, maybe.
Well, that's my point. I mean, you talk to different cultures, and that's the problem with the human mind is, I don't know about you guys, but I ain't smart enough to figure all this out. So that's what we always do. We're always categorizing and putting things in square boxes, and you can't take divine creation and intellectualize it and figure it all out. We can relate to it by calling them angel spirits or jinns or whatever we want to call them. But when you really step back and humble oneself, we got to admit it's beyond our comprehension.
So I think I see what you're saying here. So even though humans ain't smart enough to do all this stuff, some of them did write these books, but they were writing these books through divine intervention, I guess you could say.
Most of them were communicating. The rishis and the seers in India, I mean, they actually knew that our solar system went around the central sun, and they knew there was a 250 million year galactic cycle. It's all in the Rig Veda and the Vedas and the Upanishads. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the researchers of truth like Das Glossus and Daniel Joseph's school, they talk about that there are many, I forget what he said about it, but there are many jewels on the necklace or something like that lead to the truth and
to creation. So many that we'll never figure it out. Right. Another one I haven't mentioned for a while that I love is a woman named Anastasia. This is a series of books called The Ringing Cedars of Russia. And this is about a girl whose family for thousands of years, all the way back to Egypt, have lived in the Siberian wilderness. And she met a man who was a wealthy shipping merchant on a river, and she had a child with him, and she predicted that he was going to lose his fortune. He was a very wealthy shipping merchant, and that he was going to end up homeless, which he did. And he was sleeping, in garbage cans with an ex-KGB officer. And she said that she arranged the Akashic records so he could write these books, and he would become fabulously successful with that. And he has. And I would tell people to read The Ringing Cedars of Russia. There's actually a couple of versions out now by Vladimir. I forget his last name, but just Google Ringing Cedars of Russia. Why that's such an amazing book or series of books. There's like 10 of them. I've got them all here somewhere. And I love her because she talked about the spirits, and she talks about disincarnate souls, and she has a portion of the sacred magic as well. It's different. See, this is what's so mysterious about all of our souls. Apparently, God and the divine angels work completely different with different souls. Like if you look into like the Abramelin method, you look at Daskalos, who, if anyone listening knows, is the Magus of Strovolos. There's a wonderful story in there where he actually met Christ. He snuck in between the spears and looked at him. And then he was thrown out, and then he ran up ahead again when he was carrying the cross. He went in and looked up at Christ, and he winced, and a Roman soldier stamped on his foot. This is in the book, the Magus Astrobolus. Stamped on his foot, broke his toes with his steel spikes. You know, Roman soldiers had steel like spikes and nails on their feet. And he contracted gangrene. And he said there was an earthquake afterwards, and he was happy. He could tell his mother that he didn't do anything wrong, but the earthquake caused his feet. So the last thing he remembered in that incarnation was his mother crying and his father crying because he was dying of gangrene, just a little boy, like 8 years old. And that same guy carrying the cross came through the wall, grabbed him by the hand, and took him away. Now, I don't know too many people that can tell that story.
No.
And Kyriakos Markides actually questioned several other people in his mystical group, and they said, yes, that's what happened in that incarnation. So it's very fascinating stuff. And
I remember
very
reading the Magus of Strovolos. Right after you told me about it, I bought it, and I went through that sucker in one night. I mean, I pounded through that book.
It's a profound book. There's really not another book quite like that in modern times, because I don't think you've ever had anyone that spiritually advanced being interrogated the way Markides interrogated. And Markides was actually really a great skeptic. He really tried to validate and check things as a skeptic would.
Well, I don't know what time it is where you are, but it's George Lucas's birthday. So I just want to let everybody know that. I think he's 75 now. Man.
Wow.
George Lucas is the man, right?
Live. Oh, yeah.
You get that too, though. Like, I was going to ask you about that. The films is something we've talked about on this show, and we only got a couple minutes left here, but you see a lot of this esoteric symbology even more prevalent nowadays in TV shows and films and music and everything. And everybody wants to know. I mean, some people think that it's the Illuminati or they're controlling us through magic, but I wonder sometimes if it's not spirit just working through art trying to communicate, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I was with a really dear friend last night, Mary Fall. She's a great performer. We were at McCabe's guitar shop, which is a very ancient, I shouldn't say ancient, but old guitar shop. They got stuff in there from the 1800s. It's really amazing. So I went to hear her perform last night, and Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon came up. And to me, that's always, I remember when that came out in the 70s, that just enraptured me. I used to sit there with the, 33 LP, stereo hi-fi, listen to that thing. I was just blown away with it. And one of my friends was a Berklee College of Music graduate, and he just said, oh my God, he said, I've never heard anything like this. And it's true. I've never had it since. And that album has a strange morbidness and yet a strange truth to it. Especially the last song, Eclipse, all that you touch, all that you feel, and everything's in tune when the sun is eclipsed by the moon. It's just, if you listen to that record, Money, Us and Them, all the lyrics, it's like, who the hell wrote this?
Right.
It was like spirit moved it.
Yeah. And it touches everybody. If you think about it, why is everybody so in love with it? Is it the music? I don't think so. I think a lot of it has to do with the story, what's being told, the symbols and everything too,
So Led Zeppelin. I mean, speak about the Goetia. Jimmy Page has, in fact, anybody can look this up on the internet. He used to live in Aleister Crowley's house. Jimmy Page has the sigil of a spirit out of the Goetia on his guitar amplifier when they were touring. And I don't think there's another band who had the underlying power. I mean, look at Stairway to Heaven. Just listen to it. Or When the Levee. I mean, man, these guys it was like bottle lightning, literally.
Well, listen, we got to roll out of here, but Jeff, you guys can go to his website at Jeff Harman, HARMAN, jeffharman.com. You'll be back this Friday, and then we're going to do that again a couple of times a month. And listen,
they just caught Bigfoot. I heard that down on the 105.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. We're going to get deeper into the stories and stuff and get the audience involved. And so Jeff will be back a little bit more frequently. But still, I do want to thank you for doing that, Jeff. And thanks for coming on tonight, too.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It was very enjoyable.
All right, guys, go check out the website, jeffharman.com, Harman, jeffharman.com. And I want to give a shout out to the team. Also, Pacho, Don, Eric, Blake, Barbara, and I hope I'm not leaving anybody out. I'm sure I did. Thank you guys for helping me. We got the new team here together at Lighting the Void. Dennis, too. Got to give a shout out to Dennis. And don't forget as well that this show was produced by the Fringe FM and cannot be syndicated without written permission. And music was by Chronox, Guitar Man by Bundy. Other music from Space Station, Kevin MacLeod, in the public domain. Tomorrow night, Adam Loyal from Cat in the Box Podcast. We're going to be talking about their remote viewing sessions as well as 13 questions and more guests to come this week. Thanks for coming out, guys, tonight. Good night.
On this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised. We told you weeknights on the Fringe FM are now even better, and we mean it.
Do it live!
Where else can you hear the best shows and the best talent? Kick off your evening with our newest host, Alex Exum, live at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 Eastern. Hang out with me, Joe Roop, on Lighting the Void at 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern. Ryan Gable expands your mind on the secret teachings at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern. We're bringing the heat every single night. Fire it up, the Fringe FM.
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Roop, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Thank you.